Who found the best secret lunch place that everybody should know about? Yeah, Carl? Oh, were you with her? I heard about it. No, no perfect lunch places?
We're listening. Yeah.
Oh, nice. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you all for showing up on time, even though we're 3 minutes late. This is, I know someone said there's something known as Indian time or tribal time. This is EPA time. We start all meetings at least 3 to 5 minutes late, so we're right on time. So I am delighted to be here today to talk with everyone. I feel like this is really loud. Is it echoing loud for you all? I'm just loud. Okay. We're here to talk about interstate partnerships in action from the lens of the Hypoxia Task Force. And I know that this work isn't like the work that you all across the country are working on, though I do see very many familiar faces from the central part of the country here. But the work that we're talking about and that I'm going to show very briefly here at the start, I want the states from around the country, the tribes from around the country to take hints on this. We have all of these work plans are posted on our website, which I realize is not on here, but we have our website out at the help desk table there. And all of the state work plans for these grants that we'll be talking about are posted online. So other states can go explore those ideas, get familiar with what these states are doing with this kind of new special funding for this work, and you can take those ideas and be in touch with the contacts, et cetera. So what is this group? The Hypoxia Task Force is a partnership of, it's a government governing body partnership of states, tribes, and partners that are kind of state-based. The sub-basin committees, there are 3 sub-basin committees that have formed in the Mississippi Basin that are represented through the task force. And then there is a partnership of land-grant universities, each of the 12 states that are represented on the task force. Their land-grant university participates in an interstate consortium committee called SARA 46 that provides insight, guidance, outreach, education through research and extension to the task force. The task force is working towards an ambitious goal with an interim target of 2025 to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus by 20% since a baseline of the 90s, and then by 2035 to actually reduce the size of the hypoxic zone due to those reductions in the river flow of nutrients. So it's voluntary. Everyone who sits on this task force comes to the table voluntarily. There is not any reason other than to learn from the co-members and implement new and innovative ideas. The bipartisan infrastructure law in 2021 was the first time there was a federal influx of funds dedicated to this area that went to the partners directly, went to the members of the task force directly. USDA, EPA, and other federal agencies have provided some resources over the years that have been of utmost importance to move this group forward. But this new federal funding is going directly to the folks doing the work on the ground. So I'm going to just fly through this because you're going to hear from the real folks doing this work. The states, we put out an implementation memo that the states could come in for their money. They will each get about $4.6-ish million over the course of 5 years. The tribes we have 15 tribes that have applied for the money. Those grants are in process, so those are not yet up on our website, but when all those are final, you'll also be able to explore what the tribes are doing. And then we have 3 sub-basin committees, like I mentioned, and there are small grants that went to these that are going to these sub-basin committees for them to do this collaborative work. And then we also have a small grant going to the Land Grant University Consortium to do some big picture work. And I think we're going to make these slides available because I know I'm flying through this, but happy to talk about any of the points that you think you saw on the slide and delve in on the side. I'll be here all week. And I just wanted to mention, in light of, I know I said that these the work that the partners are doing is focused on nutrient reduction. That is the myopic focus of this hypoxia task force. But we are excited about the actions the states are taking through their work plans to provide climate co-benefits. And so I've listed a couple summary climate co-benefits that you'll be able to see in these work plans. And if you have any questions about that work as well, please be in touch. And thank you all for coming. Since we're just getting started right now, I'll just repeat what I said at the start. I know this Gulf Hypoxia program is not relevant to everyone across the country, but we're really hopeful that you can take some of the ideas that the states and partners are going to talk about. And we have all of the work plans online, so you can go and find those and explore some of the ideas that the states are developing and implementing through this new money. We'd like this to be an example to other state non-point source programs and other programs within the state to replicate some of the ideas that these states are doing here. So that's a big reason why we're having this session. So I am going to introduce first Dave Wall, and then I'm going to and then he'll speak. You'll ask one or two, you can ask one or two questions from him, and then I'll introduce Lauren Salvato. You can ask one or two questions from her, and then we'll have a joint discussion here at the end. So Dave Wall, Dave works as an environmental research scientist in the Watershed Division of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Dave has spent much of his 36-year career at the MPCA working on rural nutrient-related issues, including work in the feedlot, non-point source, and watershed programs. He leads Minnesota's multi-agency nutrient reduction strategy efforts to reduce nutrients in waters within Minnesota and those waters leaving the state. And I realized I didn't introduce myself. I'm Katie Flahive with EPA, and I have been a part of the non-point source program at EPA for 22 years. And I've also, for most of that time, supported the Hypoxia task force. And I've been, it's been a pleasure to work with Dave for many of those years. So Dave. He even told me he had them ready to go.
Oh, there you go. All right, perfect. Thank you, Katie. And yeah, it's been a joy to work with Katie on the Gulf of Mexico Hypoxia Task Force Coordinating Committee, and with Lauren and having the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association involved with those efforts as well. So today, yeah, we're going to focus on nutrients, as Katie mentioned, and I want to first acknowledge my co-author, Matt Drewitz. Matt's sitting up here, and Matt and I are colleagues and working on this together. So as we look at nutrients in Minnesota, we have a lot of in-state issues. We have high nitrate in our streams that are high enough to be affecting aquatic life and the health of aquatic life, particularly in southern Minnesota. We have lake eutrophication in about 700 lakes right now, and in terms of which ones are impaired, and river eutrophication impairments in over 50 stream reaches. So we have a lot of in-state reasons to work on nutrients. And I should mention too, groundwater and groundwater nitrate. That's another issue in Minnesota that's very important and relates to nutrients, and much of that groundwater nitrate feeds into our rivers and streams, so contributing to our nutrients in our in-stream situations. So Minnesota is also a headwater state for 3 major drainages leading to the Hudson Bay and the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico. And we have, as a headwater state, a lot of responsibility there. Very little water flows into the state, but so much of it flows north into Lake Winnipeg and Hudson Bay, and Lake Superior in the green area there, into the Great Lakes and out into the Atlantic Ocean. And then in the blue, a majority of the state flows in the Mississippi River drainage down to the Gulf of Mexico. So we are committed to do our part for the downstream waters and to work on the in-state needs for nutrient reduction at the same time we're addressing the downstream waters. Lake Winnipeg has a 50% nitrogen and phosphorus reduction goal for the Red River that goes into Lake Winnipeg, and that's from a late 90s baseline. And the Gulf of Mexico, the final goal will be a 45% nitrogen and phosphorus reduction from a 1980 to 96 baseline. As Katie mentioned, we have this upcoming milestone target for 2025. So we work in Minnesota on 3 major scales for addressing nutrients. We work with the major river basin scale, particularly looking at focusing on the downstream needs. We work at the Huck-8 watershed scale, and we have focused small watersheds. And I'll talk about each of those. So really the outline is to give you an overview of work in each of these 3 scales. To talk about how watershed nutrient load reductions, what are the specific reductions that are needed in that middle scale, the Huck-8 scale, that will address the major river basin scale. So kind of that interface between the 2 scales there, our larger scale and the middle scale. And then planning and tracking tools. We'll talk a little bit about some of the planning and tracking tools we have to help us with those efforts. So let's start with the major river basin scale. Our nutrient reduction strategy was completed in 2014 to support achieving local and downstream nutrient goals. And this diagram shows generally how it works. Your state level support, the federal programs as well are part of that, but large scale support and related to the science side of things with BMPs, goals and targets, the tools and the resources that are needed locally, and programs that can support this work, as well as progress tracking. And so a lot of the work in Minnesota goes through our local watershed approach and our local watershed work. Some of the programs go more directly to the landowners and in urban and rural areas. So as the BMPs are adopted in the middle column, we can improve our local waters, and the local waters then cascade downstream, and we can achieve our goals downstream. So if we look at the Mississippi River specifically, this is for phosphorus, and from pre-2000 to our final target goal. But by 2014, we had realized we had already achieved about a 30% reduction in phosphorus, and about more than a third of the source was coming from wastewater, but that was dropped down. Our wastewater phosphorus was dropped down dramatically. We made progress with cropland as well, and also in our feedlots, in our lawns, in our urban stormwater and septic systems. So we are reevaluating where we're currently at right now, and we'll continue to try and get to that 45% reduction from that pre-2000 baseline period. What we are finding, though, is the increasing precipitation that's fighting against our improvement efforts. So at the same time we're making good reductions, we're seeing in general increasing precipitation, driving more of that phosphorus into the water. For nitrogen, if we go pre-2000 to 2014, we do not see that same reduction as we did with phosphorus, the flat line there at the top. Different sources too, predominantly cropland, over 80% coming from cropland sources in the Mississippi River Basin, with wastewater representing less than 10% here. So the goal, the milestone target of getting to a 20% reduction by 2025, on our way to that 45% reduction. And in order to do that, both the milestone and the final, really, we need millions of additional acres in cover crops and perennial cropping systems, in our nitrogen, our manure and fertilizer efficiencies optimized. We need ag drainage water stored and treated. It's a lot of new practices that are still needed, in addition to the wastewater nitrogen and treating that. So what our nutrient reduction strategy does is looks at, well, what's it going to take in combination to achieve our milestone target? And for nitrogen and phosphorus, we have on the left side, it's in millions of acres, going from 0 million up to 7 million. And the light blue shows what it would take, what we need to get to. And the dark blue shows where we're at as of 2021 in terms of how many new acres we had added in. So we are accelerating our adoption. So we're going to be by 2025. We probably not going to be at the top of those light blue bars where we needed to be, but we'll be we'll have made considerable progress. So right now we're in this 3-year process of updating our nutrient reduction strategy. We had a 5-year progress report in 2020. We have the same 10 organizations who developed the original strategy working on this revision, and it's funded through the infrastructure law and the Gulf Hypoxia program administered by EPA. So we've got a lot of work to do right now, and we're planning to really update and improve the strategy, find more effective ways of reducing nutrients, new approaches to our ways of scaling up these cover crops and these BMPs and other efficiencies. And so that was then kind of relates to what Lauren's going to be talking about earlier, which was a workshop that looked at how do we scale up these practices, these multiple benefit practices. So I'm going to switch now to the Huck 8 watershed scale. So in our watershed approach in Minnesota, we develop a series of documents for each watershed. So there's considerable monitoring and assessment that goes into one report. There's another report that's where all our biological monitoring information or stressor identification report. There is a maximum daily load TMDL report. And then all of that goes into a watershed restoration and protection strategy that we abbreviate RAPS. And so that RAPS then gets considered by the local level, all the science that comes together and the strategies, potential strategies, and then decisions are made locally. What are going to be the priorities? Where are we going to focus our work? And how are we going to get it done? And so comprehensive local watershed management plans, known as One Watershed, One Plan, are developed, which then lead to the implementation. So the RAPS part, the science part of this, we have now completed it. In 2016, we only had 8 of them done, 8 watersheds. 2019, we had 42, and now we have finished all of them. So big accomplishment there that we're celebrating here in 2023. And we're also getting there with the comprehensive local watershed management plans, our One Watershed, One Plans. If we look at, and Julie, you'll be talking about this, I believe, tomorrow and some more. And these watersheds in green show where we've completed those in the state. So this is where we've taken the science, then put them into these local water plans. And so, yeah, quite a bit of the state is either done or well underway for those as well. So then the last scale I'll mention here is our focused small watershed scale. And here we have 35 projects through our 319 program, and each are prioritized for funding 4 grants over 16 years. And they're both restoration and protection projects. In addition to these 35, there are some other small watershed partnership efforts in the state going on as well. But the nice thing about these smaller watershed projects is they are focused, more prioritized, more targeted, and the community rallies around valued local water. So motivated to make some changes. Also, through this program, there's long-term funding to support staff capacity, which is very important. And then also we can do more monitoring and the linkages between cause and effect, or between changes in the land and the water, can be documented. And hopefully then we learn from all of this, figure out what's working, what's not working, and can then replicate elsewhere. And other neighboring watersheds will be motivated to do similar types of changes. So those are our 3 scales, and really all of them need to work together for this all to work in Minnesota. All 3 scales are important, and what we learn from one helps support what we're doing at their other scales. So one of the questions, though, is we look at that interface between, I work more with the major river basin scale, but also that interface between the major river basin scale and the Huck 8 watershed scale. And the question sometimes becomes, well, how much does each watershed need to do, each Huck 8 watershed, so that we can meet our goals at the state line? What are the targets? And we have recently calculated that or improved our calculations of that. And so we have here in this case showing total phosphorus load reduction targets for our watersheds and in metric tons, but we also show it in terms of a percent of reduction that's still needed. And these are all on our website, which I'll show you in a minute here. But the way we arrived at this was looked at modeling and monitoring information and took the most recent 10-year average loads. And then we figured out of those loads, how much of that is really reducible. So we're not trying to reduce loads out of more natural lands, forests and prairies. And so we came up with a percent of the loads that are reducible in that middle map. And so we would bring the two together and we have our reducible watershed nutrient loads. And then adjust those loads to the state lines, how they're reflected at the state lines. And from that, have our recommended targets for nitrogen and phosphorus for each watershed. And so this is the site where the maps and the tables and all the background on this are provided, entitled Watershed Nutrient Loads to Accomplish Minnesota's Nutrient Reduction Strategy Goals. So now I mentioned we finished all of these watershed restoration protection strategies, and now we have all these targets that are better targets. So how's that going to work? Well, we have now an updating process for all the RAPs. So now that we finished them over a 10-year period, we're going to be updating those, and there's an opportunity there then to reconsider what these needs are for our downstream waters. And so when we develop strategies locally, it can be looking at not just working on nutrients in the local water bodies, but understanding and considering how they can do their part, their fair share for achieving nutrient reduction for our statewide goals. So thus far, in conclusion, all three scales are important for non-point sources and need to work together. And I should mention too that the field research is certainly important part too in demonstration and monitoring at the field scale. We've had made much progress at all three scales in Minnesota, but really decades more work to be done. And through our nutrient reduction strategy revision process, we're engaging right now with local and state federal partners to improve our large scale strategies. And as part of that, there's some tools and resources that are useful for our watersheds for both planning, implementation, and trackings. And so that's kind of the third part of the outline here is these tools. And we have tracking tools for the BMP adoption at a large scale aggregation of BMP acreages. And this is used for nutrient reduction strategy work and looking at the big picture. But then we can also zero in on the Huck 12 and the Huck 8 BMP's adoption. So this is the combined government BMP state, federal, all our various programs and the BMPs that are adopted. So we can look at what are being adopted over the years. It goes back to 2004, updated through 2022. And so we have a pretty good idea of what's being adopted that way, but the private adoption and understanding that's another challenge. And we're working with satellite imagery and other sources of information for that. So then, but what's the effect? How do you translate these BMPs into load reductions, either for planning a look ahead or a look behind and taking credit for what's already been done? And so that's where we've got a number of tools, and all of these are used in Minnesota for different programs and different purposes. But the one I want to zero in on here is this SAM-based Tableau tool. Those of you who are working with some of these tools, it can be time consuming and there's a learning curve. And what we wanted to do is take the outputs of some of our more sophisticated modeling and make it very user-friendly, readily accessible to the watersheds. And so that's what we've done here with this new Tableau tool. And maybe what I'll do is see if I can just show this and demonstrate this quickly. But it's really something that can be used by people who aren't going to invest in learning how to run the HSPF SAM, but let's see here, we'll try. So this tool has some what's that? Oh, it's not projecting. Okay, but that's okay. We'll skip that part for now. But I encourage you to go to that site. It's very intuitive. People can figure out quite easily kind of how the loads can be reduced by individual BMPs and combinations of BMPs at the Huck 12 scale, at the Huck 8 scale, at different points in the watershed. The nearest water, the Huck 12 outlet, the Huck 8 outlet for nitrogen, phosphorus, and TSS loads. So we're going to continue to do more of that type of work and get. Let's see here. We're back. Okay, and it will be expanding and looking for new ways that we can provide our watersheds with the resources, the support they need, and the tools they need to achieve these reductions and track the reductions. So with that, I think unless I can get back here onto the right. We're just about done. The other question would be, yeah, it's just not wanting to present. The other question then is what's happening in the water? And so can we provide tools to our watersheds that will show what's going on in the water itself and the trends analysis for the waters? And so this is another new Tableau tool, which takes a wealth of monitoring information and trend analysis and puts it up on maps. So in here, looking at nitrate, flow corrected trends for nitrate 2008 to 2020, see a lot of up arrows indicating increasing trends, which we've seen over a lot of the state, but also many that are where there's no trend detected, no significant trend by the circles, and one decrease there in the southern part of the state. But this we have the trends for nitrate, for phosphorus, for flow corrected, for non-flow corrected, and can all be determined in our various watersheds throughout the state. So that is all I have right now. And Katie, you mentioned maybe we'll take a question or two and then turn it over to Lauren.
Questions for Dave?
Thank you. Are the RAPS plans, are they essentially 9-element plans at the same time? Is it a plan?
I should let someone else answer that, but yeah, they're generally we have the 9 elements are throughout those series of reports. Those 9 elements are all included, and yeah, so that's.
Two questions. What does RAP stand for again?
Watershed Restoration and Protection Strategies.
Okay, so it's all those.
Yeah, builds in all that monitoring information, modeling information, and biological stressor considerations as well.
And then you said you had those RAPs developed for a certain number of Huck 8s in your.
So we have 80 Huck 8s in the state, and we have them. Yeah, so all of them they're done for all the watersheds. We began about 10 years ago or so, and have completed them over that 10 years.
Just to elaborate a little bit more on the watershed restoration and protection strategy. Hi, I'm Julie Westerland. I work for the Board of Water and Soil Resources and have in Minnesota and done quite a bit of coordination between the agencies with all of this data that we have been very fortunate to be able to acquire over the last 10 years through our intensive watershed monitoring approach. The reports that Dave showed on his slide, the monitoring reports and the stressor identification and the TMDLs, it gets to be a whole lot of information and not really very easy to digest and understand and translate into a local plan. which is being written by a group of local government folks who have limited time and, ability to wade through these hundreds and hundreds of pages of reports. So the idea was to summarize that information into this watershed restoration and protection strategies and make it more useful for those local government folks to translate that into a plan that they can commit to. So do you like that, just to help Dave out a little bit here with what those RAPS documents really are intended to do?
Yep. Thanks, Julie. Yeah. And we do survey the local watersheds to say, how useful is all this information? How has this been helpful? And the survey is overwhelmingly saying, yes, we need this. Has been very helpful. And thank you very much for providing that. It's helped them with their local water planning.
Thanks, Dave. All right, thanks, Dave. And we will have time for joint questions at the end of the session. So now I'm going to introduce Lauren Salvato from, I call it UMRBA. I might be the only one. So I apologize consistently for that. Upper Mississippi River Basin Association. She has been working there as the Policy and Programs Director since 2017. She has degrees in environmental science as well as water resources and public policy from the University of New Mexico and Indiana University, respectively. And we've gotten to work together for a number of years now, so I'm happy to be able to say that. And thanks, Lauren. I'll move it. Yeah, you got it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, good afternoon. I did have the secret lunch spot. It's Kamarchuk's. It's the Eastern European deli. It's delicious. It is a 10-minute drive, so you would want to grab a friend with a car. I am based here, so I'm full of good food ideas. I'm a self-proclaimed foodie. So I'm Lauren Salvato. I work for UMRBA, and I also have this unique position where I volunteer for the Lower Minnesota River Watershed District. I live 2 blocks from the Minnesota River, and this sort of gut checks me. Like, I live in a headwater state, but I also have this challenge being on a district that's on the receiving end of all the sediment that we have on the Minnesota River. And if you're not familiar, the Minnesota River has tons of challenges, sediment being one of them. So just as this is a national conference, I just want to spend a little more time talking about how great the Mississippi River is, and then the Upper Mississippi River, which I work with more intimately. So it flows roughly 1,600 miles from Lake Itasca, the headwaters in northern Minnesota, to the confluence of the Ohio River. So approximately 1,100 miles are commercially navigable. So we have 37 locks and dams, both on the Mississippi River and the Illinois waterway, to create sort of a stairway for barge traffic to move. The majority of those were put in the 1930s. So the river is dredged to maintain a 9-foot navigation channel, and barge is an incredibly efficient way to move goods and materials. The capacity of a barge is 15 times that of a rail and 60 times that of a truck. And so everything that I do at UMRBA, and I think that we do very well on the river here, is manage the river in a multi-purpose lens. And that was further instilled by Congress in 1986, declaring the Upper Mississippi River Basin a nationally significant ecosystem and a nationally significant commercial navigation system. So just to highlight those 2 really big uses of the river. So on the economic side, we've got $548 billion annually, supporting over 1.86 million jobs. And this was a study that we did in partnership. This is 1 to 2 counties removed from the river itself. The Upper Mississippi River has a lot of ecological value too. So we've got 3 national refuges on the river. Our states manage lands as well. Got 500 boat access points from the headwaters between the confluence with the Ohio River. And the river supports more than 127 species of fish, 30 species of freshwater mussel, and 300 species of birds that migrate through the Upper Mississippi River as a major migratory flyway. So with that introduction to kind of who is UMRBA, and I will spend some time on this because we are really, really different than Orsenco or NEIWPCC, the host of this workshop. So we were formed by the governors of the 5 states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri, to coordinate interstate related issues on their behalf. Our board members are gubernatorial appointees that sit at DNRs, departments of ag, environmental regulatory agencies that really represent that wide range of river-related interests. And we were formerly a federal state compact in 1977, but we were abolished during the Reagan administration, and we opened our doors the next day as a 501c3. So all that said is that we don't actually have land or regulatory functions on the river. We speak as an association of states, and we are consensus-based. So we work on a bunch of different issues: ecosystem restoration, hazardous spills, commercial navigation, clean water, invasive species, flooding, you name it. But within the water quality program, which I run, my bread and butter is the monitoring, nutrients, chloride, HABs, and emerging contaminants. So I think as Katie mentioned, so UMRBA is a sub-basin committee member of the Hypoxia Task Force for the Upper Basin, and we've been in that position since February of 2019. Okay, and then the other thing is, so this work was done with a cooperative agreement. It wasn't through the Gulf Hypoxia Program Plan, so I just want to differentiate that, but at the end of my talk, I will kind of talk about what we're planning to do with our Gulf Hypoxia Program dollars. So our workshop objectives were to really improve understanding and ability to communicate about conservation practices that provide multiple benefits, really strengthen our regional collaboration and coordination, increase awareness of successful implementation efforts so we really can replicate those, really determine strategies to trigger increases in conservation practice adoption on ag lands, and then really figure out what we want to pursue collaboratively as an association of states, individual states, federal agencies, etc. Just want to ground you too on a definition here. So when I'm saying multi-benefit conservation practices, I'm meaning a singular conservation practice that provides more than one beneficial outcome. I think wetland is probably the first one that comes to mind. It has habitat, flood attenuation, water quality benefits, etc. And the term's really synonymous with like regenerative ag, sustainable ag, what have you, whatever buzzword you want to use in that case, climate smart commodity, etc. So first workshop, we focused in on some social science research and communications, financial tools, and we had a really, really wide range of participants in this workshop: state and federal agencies, nonprofits, universities, industry, and for-profit entities such as food cooperatives. And given that this was a whole workshop that lasted a day and a half, I'm just going to give you some nuggets here. So we had some communication and social science focus, which is a really, really huge part of looking at why a landowner chooses to adopt conservation, how you can utilize behavior change science to help you figure out the best ways to reach landowners, maybe their perceptions of risk, their trusted networks, and then we even drilled further down to hear from Illinois Farm Bureau about the ways it reaches its diverse membership. And I got really carried away on Canva for this slide, so I'm going to read to you what I put in each of these bubbles here. But so the question, and we spent half of a day and a half in breakout groups. So again, just some nuggets here. So what are the ways we can adopt or we can motivate adoption beyond formal training? And what are some non-traditional outreach approaches? So the first one, identify single point of contact for EPA, NRCS, and cost share programs. Shift the focus on yield and to profitability and return on investment. Develop opportunities to innovate, drive, and incentivize within existing programs such as EQIP and SRF. Map private programs to understand where funding is going and how it could be better deployed. Test innovative financial mechanisms at a pilot or demonstration scale, and help operating landowners feel competent. Just realize that these slides got a little mixed up, but I'll just keep going because that's going to be redundant there on this next slide. But anyway, so for financial there, we heard from the Land Institute and Forever Green Initiative about the suite of continuous living cover that they're trying to get to market. And maybe you've heard of Kernza, that's the most well-known of the lot. We heard about the Nature Conservancy and their work on getting to ecosystem services market, and then Polk County about the batch and build model or single fiscal agent model. And I'll talk about that in subsequent slides. I'm a super big fan of this concept. So that was where the what I said earlier was supposed to be on that slide. So hold on, I'm gonna go back and tell you about what was supposed to be on this slide. Okay, so non-traditional outreach approaches. Incentivize and reward highly effective NRCS representatives. And really, like, just to further drill down on that, like, how can we keep the right staff in the right positions and really compensate and value the years of relationships and time that they put in developing relationships. Employee training and professional development, and encourage farmer mentors for new conservation staff. So a farming 101 workshop, farmer ride-alongs, convene events and employee marketing to sell the problem, not the practice, develop and implement a text network for farmers, host a monthly watershed cafe to train conservation staff on sales and techniques and landowner relationship skills, and develop and fund a government demonstration farm that allows that respective entity to assume the risk. So these, we have a full summary on our website. If you want to dig into all these really great ideas. These were not mine. These were everyone else's at that workshop. So moving on to the second workshop, kind of took a different turn, and that was just on leverage points. So places that we can look within a complex system, make tweaks to produce really big changes. And so we focused this mapping, this evaluation on 5 different types of leverage points. This sounds really theoretical. I promise I'll give you some more concrete examples. So if we're looking at technical coordination, conservation agronomists, cross-agency conservation specialists, cross-sector coordination efforts, streamline funding, that batch and build, again, I'll tell you about that. It's a great one. Peer-to-peer networks, producer-led watershed groups, farmer and practitioner leadership development, really bridging that ag-urban partnerships, really cultivating those new and beginning producers. This was not my brainchild. This was my colleague that facilitated the workshop. So just bear with me because I'm not a theoretical person. I'm a very detailed, concrete person. But let me just explain how this can be of value to you when you're thinking about how to make tweaks and addressing problems. So the system as mapping was really coined by Danella Meadows, the author. We tweaked this for conservation practice, ag practice adoption. So we can illuminate aspects of the whole, we can understand aspects within a dynamic system, and then we can use that to target interventions. So just looking at the slides, so we've got, it may be a little hard for you to read, I recognize that, but the whole process of adopting conservation, observe problem, an intent to act, a diagnosis of the problem, a selection of the multi-benefit conservation practice, funding for construction, actual construction, operation, the evaluation of the effectiveness of that conservation practice. And then what also should be added is the maintenance of that practice. And then below that are every type of entity that you can imagine that would be involved along the way in that. Okay, now to the batch and build. Because, okay, first of all, this is out of Iowa. I live in Minnesota, but our states are so interested in replicating this. So I'm just going to talk about it because I talk about it a lot. I was talking about today at lunch with Carl. I can't stop talking about batch and build. So this is what came up for Iowa, Polk County. They were having issues getting edge of field practices installed. In 2015 to 2020, they had six, remember, in 5 years. And it wasn't because they weren't trying, they were doing watershed outreach, field days, surveying sites, they had 75 to 100% cost share. But they realized that it was too much hassle. There's maybe misunderstanding around what edge of field practices do, especially when you've got these infield, these cover crops, all these other things, these other programs, these other incentives that you are really just kind of muddling the menu. And then there's tax considerations. So if a landowner gets any of that cost share dollar, then they have to report on their taxes. And by the way, too, this photo is a completed picture of a saturated buffer if you're less familiar with this ag conservation field. So 6 installations from 2015 to 2020, 51 in 2021, and 85 in 2022. So that's, remember that number. How did they do it exactly? So they reduce the hassle factor for landowners by they were able to get these edge of field practices installed within 3 interactions with the landowner. They utilized a local government unit or county as the fiscal agent. So they held the money. Landowner never has to touch the money. And then they used batching of multiple practices into one contract. So it's more efficient for someone providing engineering design and construction of that edge of field practice. So that has been really, really successful. And the photo you're seeing here too is just a bioreactor which treats that subsurface water coming off the tile drain. So that's in progress of construction there. So batch and build really, it addresses multiple leverage points as I kind of was just kind of alluding to in that case. And our states are really interested in replicating this model. I think it's really inherently challenging though to recognize that we're trying to turn conservation on its head. A lot of the private sector is being involved in that. NRCS is still a wonderful partner, but some of this is kind of taking NRCS out of the picture a little bit. So, and then the other piece here is Iowa's been able to take this across 3 counties, but it's looked drastically different across 3 counties. And it's been challenging for them, as they say on the administrative side, to train someone to be that fiscal agent. So regardless of all this, our states are really, really motivated to scale this up, really shift that paradigm. And if we can do this on a bigger scale than it's currently being done, then we can influence federal policy and really utilize NRCS pots of funding or whatever other pots of funding to really work for us. So hopefully where we go next is we're having conversations now about doing more batch and build through the RCPP program, potentially, AFA. And then that leads me to actually what we're doing with the Gulf Hypoxia program dollars. Katie said this already, but what I find amazing is that, the Hypoxia task force goes back to the 90s, but this was the first time that federal funding was really authorized to implement the Gulf Hypoxia Action Plan. The states have demonstrated, and the other recipients of this funding have really demonstrated the need for this funding. So not being credited through the Gulf Hypoxia program, I know UMRBA will be doing a lot of federal advocacy about the value of this in the future. So as far as what we're doing as a sub-basin committee, we are looking at similarities and differences across the 5 state nutrient reduction strategies to look at the most effective interstate actions. Batch and build will hopefully be one of them. And then we want to do some adaptive management work and then communications work as well. So even though as a 12 hypoxia task force state and all these other partners, we're going to be communicating about those interim targets, the reality is the 5 basin states are the major contributors of that loading. So it's sort of a different communication angle that I think we'll take at a 5 state level. So just more general conclusions, maybe just from our workshops. I think the systems map can be really helpful. If you want more resources on that, I'm happy to provide them. And it's not just what needs to be changed, but who can change it. I think it's sort of important to recognize is that we have to find the matchmaker for this action. So here I am telling you about all these great ideas, it's not necessarily going to be UMRBA that does it. It might be a soil and water conservation district that gets scaled up to the state and therefore, and so on and so on. Social science is such a critical component of it, and it's sort of a relatively newer science relative to conservation practice adoption, but we have to think about that next generation of conservation practice adopters and how they're different from those early adopters. And really just to not emphasize it, I can't emphasize it enough, multi-sector collaboration, public-private partnerships. Our states cannot reduce nutrients on their own, and we really need everyone involved to move the needle. So with that, I'm happy to take questions, and yeah, Dave and I can, Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you both. Couple of questions for Lauren. None. Yes. Thank you.
Does batch and build work for something beyond agricultural BMPs? Is there other practices that you see in the multi-state region where this could work?
Yeah, so we've been talking about this a lot actually, because we have some states, so Minnesota here has the buffer law, and maybe you're less so interested in bioreactors, right? So every state in the 5 state at least has their own different constraints. So even Missouri would rather focus on riparian buffers. I think right now the focus should be on edge of fields. It's not to say that and that could be the case for urban as well, if that was also what you're getting at. what I've heard from our 5 states is that it's harder to sell edge of fields because it's not directly related to your profitability margins in field. So like at least what the batch and build has done a really good job of, I think I forgot to mention, the landowner also after getting those edge of field practices in gets $1,000 payment. So it's sort of like really upping the edge of field because there's plenty of incentives for infield right now. We've got climate smart commodity and all that money. So I would say not to muddle what's already really confusing about your conservation practice adoption options is like, I think at least we've decided and thought that staying focused on edge of field would probably be like the smarter thing to do right now.
While you're thinking of another question, I'll just mention, there are examples of that model in other parts of the country. In Maryland, there's a model that is similar to the batch and build. There's some private nonprofit groups in the Chesapeake that coordinate money in Pennsylvania at that kind of thing. So there are other examples. If you're interested, we could maybe get a summary of these ideas, but this Polk County one is one that we've been hearing about. Did I see another question? Yes.
Yeah, this question is for Dave. Andrew from Wisconsin. You mentioned going to the Tableau model to simplify estimating load reductions and stuff. My question is, what was the rationale to go to that versus PTM app, which is already pretty well developed in your state?
Yeah, the load results and the reductions from best management practices were determined through our HSPF SAM model or tool. The HSPF SAM model is quite a sophisticated hydrologic model that then we apply the BMP's information, the research on the BMP's to. And so it's load specific for every watershed. So when we're taking a reduction, it's specific to that HUC 12 or that HUC, HUC 8. So it's very good in terms of the loads and sophisticated modeling there. Plus we have it over most of the state. There's only a couple of watersheds where we don't have the modeling and the HSPF SAM. So one was the coverage of the state. The other was the strength in terms of the hydrologic loading that's specific to the watersheds. The third thing that I'd mention is with nitrogen, it takes into account the different pathways for nitrogen. It looks at the surface runoff, which is going to represent about 5% of the runoff of the nitrogen load to the state waters, surface waters. It takes into account the tile drainage pathway, which is the highest loading pathway, and then also the groundwater base flow. Whereas some of the other tools do not deal so well with the nitrate subsurface pathways. So it was really good for that. So basically we took our consultant wrote a script to take all of this wealth of modeling information and produce these tables that showed the outputs. And from those tables, then we could translate that into the maps, into the Tableau tool, which makes it really accessible, readily usable information for most anyone.
Okay, I'm hiding in the middle here. So Lauren, can you talk a little bit more about those 2 workshops that you held? Kind of how did they come together? How did you, find a way to justify a cost for holding 2 of them a year apart? How did you recruit people to come to both? If people came to both, who were those people? Did they already work with you? Did they trust you? What did you talk about? All that.
Whoa, okay. Good questions. So I didn't mention this. So we had state and federal agency, the planning committee that was guiding the work. So there are a few in this room, one of which is Dave. Matt was involved as well. So they really drove like the priority issues. Again, we're the voice of the state. So we have to kind of be all on the same page on that. In terms of recruitment, this was kind of a newer space for us. Certainly we had a lot of our own contacts, but I reached out to Jenny and asked just to share some of her contacts. I had our state say who should be at this workshop. And so from there, I built up a contact list of about 300 people. So that in itself was really, really valuable. I don't think it hurts that we've been around since 1981. I think that certainly has helped with that. In terms of our layout, so we had really focused the audience to be those that weren't maybe they worked with farmers, but they weren't farmers themselves. So that was just because, again, I'm helping our 5 states better implement their state nutrient reduction strategies. And so that was kind of our level. I think one of the things that stuck out from the workshop was really interesting to me was someone had said these conversations 10 years ago wouldn't have happened with this type of different people. So I guess I can't speak to that because I wasn't really working as a professional at that point. And so anyway, I guess I'm really impressed that we had all the different expertise come together in the room. And it was really, really valuable. In terms of the layout, when you're writing an EPA grant, you're trying to get it in, you're just like, this sounds good, right? Your part. So it did work though. It kind of allowed us to take what we had learned, we gained momentum, and we kind of shifted gear. And then now it's sort of where do we even go next with that? Which the grant money, yes, is running out, but this is kind of where the Gulf Hypoxia money kicks in a little bit too, which will be really nice for us as well. So hopefully that answered your questions.
We have about 2 minutes left. More questions for folks? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, okay. No.
I'll go again. Okay, so again, I guess for both of you, keeping momentum going, one, I guess on PCA side, you have a ton of other stuff coming your way with funding, and then you're trying to also hire people and then also disperse funding and then also manage those grants. And then Lauren, you're trying to keep up momentum with all of these other people that you just engaged, and they're about to get a lot busier. And in order to not burn those bridges, really, you have to prove to them that you did something with the time that they gave you. So how are you both dealing? Yes.
You want to say? Yeah, right. That's a constraint everyone has. So when we've been having conversations about doing a multi-state RCPP to replicate the batch and build model, what has come up so much is capacity across local, state, federal sector. And we don't really have a great explanation. Someone that maybe doesn't have as bad of hiring constraints or grants management challenges or whatever is someone we're looking to partner with. But I guess it's really just led me to the private sector a little bit. Food co-ops, those conservation agronomist partnerships. There have been a lot of for-profit land management agencies that popped up to kind of make this to serve as landowner outreach. They're knowledgeable about all the different cost share programs for ag conservation. And so I guess I'm sort of seeing that at least kind of pop up, but you're right. There's this question with Minnesota. They just got a really big $25 million RCPP. Congrats, but do they want to get into another one this next fiscal year? Yeah, these are just things that we're completely grappling with. But I think having that multi-layered coordination between the Hypoxia task force and then the sub-basin level down to the state, I think we have some really good forums, at least to share ideas, and at least when funding allows, which now is ripe for them, that we can do them as we can.
I'll just mention with the nutrient reduction strategy work, we are looking at what all is coming in and all these different opportunities, and looking at both opportunities and barriers for scaling up adoption. Really, I mentioned it's a multiple agency effort and collaboration, and our Department of Agriculture is leading the charge on kind of figuring out, working with a team of others, of how do we scale up adoption? What are the approaches? How do we best deal with all these different programs that are coming our way? And also, what else do we need to do that's missing? Where are the gaps? And so we'll be looking at that over the next year and a half, and hopefully coming up with some real good solutions moving forward.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you both so much. And thanks everybody for sticking around, listening, learning. Like I said, on the Gulf Hypoxia website, the address, you can QR code scan it out there. All the work plans will be coming online. So if you're a state not in this area and you're not familiar with this work, you can really dig in deep and explore what's going on with these funds. So thank you all very much.
Oh, I think we have a break. Results of the workshop or?
Well, the November 2022 summary, but
Okay.
I'm still supposed to.
Oh, right.
Okay, we have a break in both. We'll be back in both rooms at 2:45.
But yeah, I'm excited to see it too.
Yeah.
This is for tomorrow.
Sorry,
This is for tomorrow. Oh, sorry.
Today.
Yes.
the last, the day.
Which session? Is that
Yeah, that one.
urban community engagements?
No, I'm the last one there.
Does this have the same name on it?
It might not. I think it just says Urban Wonders Initiative. I don't think it's in, sorry, it's in this folder.
This one? Oh, right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know.
Sorry about that.
You are good.
Right.
I'm sure it opens up real quick. Maybe. All right, so this is the one, the old one. Please, perfect. I like the sound by the way.
It's my
Very,
mom's from 10 years ago.
it's very artsy. Okay, yeah, 1 second here. This is the
Urban session, right?
urban green infrastructure. Yes, so I have the two presentation. I have Chris's and Andrew's. They're right here.
You know them?
Yes, Chris, I just saw. He was in this room. And then and Andy or Chris is right there. And then Andy is
It's
he's right
Obropta?
there. There's Andy and then there's Chris Obropta. You can talk to them right
Okay.
now and see what they want to do. Everything should be good. I'm gonna open the presentation so they're ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
They're out there eating cookies. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We have an interesting set of talks on urban runoff and green infrastructure. And before I start, I want to pitch a new document that we just published at EPA headquarters on bioretention systems. And it's a pictorial guide to how to design a bioretention system. So we'll be talking about it at the poster session if you want to learn more about this document. I'd first like to introduce Malcolm Harper, who is going to introduce Andrew Hrycyna. Malcolm's from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who will share the story of simple yet mighty BMPs that economically remove a significant amount of phosphorus from the urban environment. This project, conceived and implemented by the Mystic River Watershed Association. For more than 50 years, the Mystic River Watershed Association has been protecting and restoring the watershed for the benefit of both the people and the wildlife that call the Mystic their home. This area includes Boston and parts of more than 20 other area communities. The watershed is a network of rivers and streams and ponds that all flow into the Mystic River and ultimately the Boston Harbor. Andy joined the Mystic River Watershed Association in 2014. He came there from the Sustainability and Environmental Management program at Harvard Extension School, where he received a master's in ecological management. After many years of, he now leads the Mystic River Watershed Association's water quality monitoring program and restoration efforts across the watershed. Please welcome Andy Hrycyna. Thank you, Malcolm, and thank you for introducing me, and thank you for inviting us to speak. I'm honored to speak with, to be invited by 319 and by MassDEP to tell this story about our watershed and about this specific project that we've rolled out over the past couple of years. Just to set the scene, the Mystic River, as Malcolm said, is 76 square miles in urban Boston, with 600,000 residents. We think of it as the most urbanized watershed in New England, and it comes with many of the challenges that urban rivers face, the predictable challenges. And I have a phrase that my colleagues get perhaps sick of hearing, but to summarize the effects of urbanization on river hydrology and ecology, I have this catchphrase that cities change rivers, and the cities around Boston have certainly changed the Mystic River. From the point of view of non-point source pollution, two aspects stand out. One is that the Mystic River watershed as a whole is more than 40% impervious surface, which is a kind of remarkable fact about, on average, 40% impervious surface. Some towns like Somerville are close to 80% impervious surface. And most major water bodies in the Mystic are declared impaired for phosphorus, by phosphorus in on the state's 303D list. And the Mystic River is not usually pea soup green. That picture in the lower right is a cyanobacteria bloom sometime back. Somewhat common occurrence in our river and others in Boston, driven fundamentally by excess phosphorus pollution and excess nutrient loads. So over the past few years, we've been focusing on phosphorus as a point of leverage for improving environmental conditions. When I started 9 years ago, and my boss said on my first day, Andy, I have one word for you, and that is phosphorus. You're going to learn a lot about phosphorus in the next few years, and I have. We started by through this sort of workflow by doing some field science. This is all in collaboration, of course, with MassDEP and with especially Region 1 EPA, which supported this work with technical support and other funding throughout. We contributed some phosphorus field data collection and chlorophyll data collection, but the data was then handed off to EPA and a team brought together by EPA, and not an official TMDL or not a straight ahead TMDL, but a so-called alternative TMDL was published in 2020. The science behind creating a nutrient budget and calculating the maximum loads compatible with meeting water quality standards was done, but the mandates right away were not imposed on municipalities. The idea of the alternative TMDL is meant to be collaborative and iterative, and so the targets we hope will roll out for over the next few years, but it's a incremental rather than all at once kind of process. That TMDL report led directly to a set of workshops that EPA and DEP and many other partners helped with, including University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center. And these were half-day workshops with multiple municipalities in our watershed, where contractors were hired to help ordinance review and with practical projects on the ground. And the stormwater trench project that I'll describe for the majority of this talk was one of those pilot projects in the town of Arlington. In the years since then, we've sort of, and when I say we, I should add that I mean usually municipalities in our watershed. We work as a partner and facilitator, but of course they're doing the on the ground work. But we in the Mystic watershed have moved on to implementation and have taken that model and sort of replicated it throughout the watershed. And that's the story I'm going to tell you today. So just to pause a bit on the alternative TMDL, it had two big conclusions. One, that the majority of phosphorus load to the river, that big blue piece of pie, is from stormwater. And second, that the stormwater load reductions required to meet water quality targets under future conditions, so future conditions were considered, are essentially 60%. So how, in a landscape of 42% impervious surface, do you go about starting to reduce stormwater phosphorus loads by as much as 60%? Well, we turn to the tools that you all know about very well of green infrastructure. And at one end of the scale are large stormwater wetlands. And this is a particularly beautiful one, actually, in our watershed in the city of Cambridge. It's the result of sewer separation from a mandated CSO mitigation. Stormwater had to go to a nearby brook, and as a essentially, phosphorus filter, among other things, this stormwater wetland is used to improve water quality. But it's 3.4 acres, and there are precious few opportunities for 3.4 acre stormwater wetlands in the highly developed landscape. So although this is an effective tool, it can't be our only tool. And so we turn to small scale solutions, as many urban areas do, from rain gardens and bio basins on the left to the stormwater trenches. I'm talking somewhat less photogenic that I'm about to talk about on the right. I was pleased when our colleague from Kansas the other day talked about the idea of restoring natural hydrology and agricultural landscapes, of reconnecting terrestrial hydrology with aquatic. And I realized that, of course, we're doing exactly the same thing in
in the urban setting, these efforts of green infrastructure are effectively making water go where it would have gone had we not built a city, and trying to derive water quality benefits from that technique. So the design, the stormwater trench design that's the center of this little project, I'll describe really quickly here. It's best, again, pioneered by the town of Arlington in collaboration with UNH Stormwater Center. I was kind of charmed by a comment that the town engineer in Arlington made after working on this. And he said the days in the field with the consultant from UNH Stormwater Center, thinking about this problem of how to make cheap, cost-effective retrofits to catch basins that could work as effective phosphorus tools was the best set of work days he'd had in the last 10 years. It got him thinking as an engineer, problem solving at this kind of innovative level. And in any case, this is the design that came out of it. And the way to think about this is there's a catch basin in the bottom diagram, the catch basin on the right-hand side of the screen. And if you, the stormwater trench goes off to the left of that in the direction of the blue arrow. The pipe that goes off in the direction of the green arrow is the main stormwater network pipe. So as the catch basin, but the pipe to the left, the infiltration trench, perforated PVC pipe in a trench filled with gravel, is 3 inches lower than the other pipe. So if you imagine a rain event and this catch basin begins filling with water, that yellow level goes up. As the first opening it sees is to the left, and water goes off to the left and fills that storage device, effectively the chamber below or the space below the perforated pipe to the left. And until it's saturated, until water isn't being absorbed faster than infiltrated faster than it's coming in, at which point the level rises and the stormwater system works as it normally would. So it's effectively diverting the first bit of a big storm, or in principle, all the flow from a smaller storm into that storage device. And so we think of these, the secret sauce here being a kind of scrappiness. There's nothing like super innovative to the technology. It's a simple infiltration device, but everything in the way that the siting is done and the design is meant to maximize cost efficiency. And so we sort of take the low-hanging fruit at every opportunity. And I thought I'd walk you through a couple of those features of this project. So first, the siting and design are very simplified. So there's an off-the-shelf design, that schematic that I showed you, that's essentially replicated at each site. Most catch basins look like every other catch basin, so you know what to expect in these settings. And the planning work, the siting work, can be done by well-trained field techs who are not engineers. And sort of proof of concept of this is that we did this as an organization. We trained, with the help of the municipality, trained a team of field techs that went and, for a 604B project, cited more than 200 of these devices in collaboration with the town engineer, but really on their own in the field, gathering data and doing these calculations. One example of like looking for the most efficient solutions here is that we rule out soil types that don't have high infiltration rates. So we're only picking potential sites in hydrologic soil group A soils with very fast infiltration rates. And though that rules out a lot of catch basins, it still leaves many in our watershed. And so in a town like Medford, there's still 200 opportunities for using this practice in a place that otherwise wouldn't be utilized for stormwater management. So that's sort of the first filter. Another filter is that we work to avoid utility service line conflicts. So if citing a trench from a catch basin here to in that direction, we'll stop at the first service line interruption. Not because it's technically impossible to build a trench past or around that service line, but just to minimize construction costs, just to make that installation as efficient as possible. There's field work that gets done, field measurements taken of the catch basin, the depth, the depth of the invert, and a kind of calculation of the maximum trench depth, given that there's a limit to how deep we want to dig as well, because if you dig too deep a trench, you're required to use a trench box for construction, and that raises costs. So these are kept relatively shallow, and opportunities are looked for where we can, despite that shallowness, still get substantial storage and effective phosphorus reduction. The system comes with a UNH stormwater calculator for calculating phosphorus reduction benefits. So you plug in the parameters that you've determined from the field into the calculator, and importantly, you also delineate the even estimating is, but delineate the stormwater catchment to that specific catch basin. So the impervious area in the city block that is specifically draining to that catch basin. And so our project, our 604B project, emerged with 200 of these potential locations where they've been vetted, they've been put through those filters. Field work has been done to confirm their viability, and the phosphorus benefit can be from each can be calculated in advance. I think of these as sort of 80% due diligence. There's still, you still have to call DigSafe to make sure that the utility lines are where you think they are, and so forth. But there, a lot of work has been done to this point. I should pause here and say that if there's a secret to, if there's a kind of a reason these are effective, it's that we can size them for at least 1/10 of an inch of rain on the impervious surface that drains to that local spot. And this is a performance curve from the Massachusetts MS4 permit for an infiltration trench in the type of soil that we're talking about. And you can see that even if you size a storage device for, or an infiltration trench for 1/10 of an inch of rain, you get something like 30% annual phosphorus reduction. So it's this idea of diverting the first bit of water gets you this disproportionate benefit for phosphorus reduction. And the devices are small, but they're also cheap. So the idea is to build a bunch of these to take advantage of this feature. And the math works out for the scale of the devices that we're working with. So in this 604B project, we visited 668 sites. We ruled out 2/3 of them for one reason or another, and cited as many as 224. So then as I said, we've moved on to implementation thanks to 319 grant and other implementation grants. And I thought I'd show you a few slides about that as well. Again, this project started with a pilot in Arlington, Massachusetts, where some 25 were built in an early grant cycle. Part of the spirit of this is technology transfer to other communities. And so a second grant worked with the town of Lexington as well, so that the lessons learned could be transferred to that municipality as well. The 319 program is funding additional trenches in several other communities. And if you add the 224 that we sort of plotted out, potentially over the next few years, we look forward to the possibility of siting and building, hundreds of these trenches across the landscape. This is just a photo of a field visit from town engineers from other municipalities watching a town engineer who had experience with this system do a field investigation along with our field tech crew. And this is what a construction site looks like. It's a trench. It's a simple device. With an observation port and a maintenance port that can be used to flush out the pipe. But then as you see, when it's finished, it's paved over and is utilizing a part of the city's, the space under a city for stormwater management that would otherwise be just impervious surface. So the bottom line here is that from an estimated costs in one sub-project here brought a rate of spending per pound of phosphorus to about $20,000. That can vary from city to city and site and project to project, season to season. But $20,000 to $25,000 a pound of phosphorus is the ballpark we're in, and that's very competitive with other stormwater management practices, and it's replicable in our densely populated watershed. The 319 program will allow MassDEP communities to build more than 65 trenches in at least 3 municipalities, including Massachusetts EJ communities. And I should say that Myra, our organization itself, serves again as a catalyst for this, where we help with grant writing, with organizing municipalities into small coalitions, into managing grants, and in outreach and education. Speaking of outreach and education, we have under the current 319 program a fun menu of items that we're implementing in education. We have a full-time environmental educator who works in classrooms from K to 12, and a classroom educator at a staff meeting won my heart one day when she came in and said, I have to report to everyone that who would have guessed that stormwater is sexy, that stormwater is a sexy subject in schools. People love it. And I said, I would have guessed. I actually wouldn't have guessed that, but it turns out to be true. It's this really interesting, view into how a city works, into the interface between the built environment and the natural world. And I think it's proven a very useful tool for our environmental education program. We're also going to build models with engineering students who are going to design and fabricate these models out of plexiglass and plywood at Tufts University for use in classrooms where kids can pour water and see how these things work and think about why someone would go to the trouble of building one of these things. Signage and stenciling and public presentations as well as a professional video for students and for residents. So I just wanted to end by sort of itemizing some of the advantages we see for this approach. First, it leverages common and existing infrastructure. So we're essentially, building off a structure that's already there, the catch basin, in a public right-of-way. These are all owned by the towns, so no permits are required. It's a simple, it's an amendment to a catch basin, essentially. Again, it focuses on this sort of first flush of phosphorus where the maximum reduction benefit comes. No engineering firms are needed to design these things, so it's meant to be a kind of plug-and-play modular design, in-house design. Again, relatively low cost per pound of phosphorus, competitive with the best alternatives. And it's a distributed solution to a distributed problem, right? And in a watershed with 40% impervious surface, this is classic non-point source pollution problem. It's coming from everywhere. And as you think about infiltrating water across the landscape, can also imagine co-benefits from that include, increased base flow and reduced water temperatures, possible local flood mitigation and extreme precipitation events, sort of climate resilience aspects as well. And finally, it can be made routine. And this is sort of our pitch to communities, that every time you're tearing up a road, think about putting in take that opportunity to put in a stormwater trench to capture that benefit, or if you're making a catch basin improvement. We're sort of not there yet in terms of making this common practice in the absence of grant funding, but the municipalities in the presence of grant funding are very eager to move ahead with this. And finally, just a few other takeaways. Of course, we love these things, and we love sort of evangelizing about them, but there are always trade-offs. There are fewer co-benefits than with other forms of GI. They're not green, for instance. There's no above ground green aspect to them. And we're working with Town of Arlington on variations that include trees and other more classic green infrastructure features. It also can't be the only way forward. Our alternative TMDL calls for 4,000 pounds of nutrient reduction per year, which would be 12,000 of these structures, roughly. And we don't have 12,000 sites for these structures. So whatever the solution to phosphorus management is, it can't be only these things, but these are low-hanging fruit that are attractive first steps. We also think that non-structural BMPs, especially high-intensity street sweeping, there's a lot of recent science that we hope will get, we're told there's going to be incorporated into next MS4 permit about the value of removing organic material essentially from the streets before it gets into the water. We also want to look at the performance of these devices over time and think about asset management systems that, because these are small, it only makes sense to use them if you make a lot of them. But when you have a lot of them, you suddenly have an accounting problem and a kind of asset management problem. And there may be a regional efficiency to finding a software solution that helps municipalities, lower the bar of implementing these things by simplifying the asset management. So that's the story, and I will be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That was very enlightening, and I look forward to having a robust discussion after Chris talks. That raises a lot of questions about pollution prevention and retrofits and the cost of retrofits and long-term operation and maintenance of these systems and declining performance. And we can get into any of that, just trying to stimulate you, just formulate some questions that we can quiz our speakers on. I'm going to introduce Chris Obropta, and he's from Rutgers University in New Jersey, and he's going to introduce himself.
Come on, Devin, let's go. Running out of time. There's beer to be drunk tonight. Let's go.
You can find your badge.
Yeah, it's still at the bar. Okay, so this is my contact information. I'm going to tell you who I'm with. This project was sponsored by a bunch of different people. We tend to get a lot of money from private foundations. So Dodge Foundation, the Sea Grant is another organization we get money from, William Penn Foundation here, and National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. I'm with the Rutgers Cooperative Extension Service. Rutgers University is a land-grant college for the state of New Jersey. One of our missions is to reach out into the state of New Jersey and help people solve their problems. So extend the knowledge of university out to the state. All of you have land-grant colleges in your state. You should be reaching out to them for help. I run the Water Resources Program. This is our mission statement. As you can see here, it has all the appropriate buzzwords in it. We're supposed to engage and empower communities, which is what non-point source pollution is all about, right? We're trying to get people to do the work for us so we don't have to do it ourselves. Trying to give people practical science-based solutions, which University of New Hampshire, I guess it was Jamie probably did it with Jamie Ewell, right? Their stormwater center gave Mystic River that solution, a cheap solution, practical solution, works You know, so that's kind of what we're all about with extension. And the other thing is trying to build equity and sustainability in our states. Equity becomes a very important word in New Jersey. We have a lot of environmental justice communities that we work with. So a little bit about New Jersey. We're the most densely populated state in the nation. We've got 21 counties and 565 municipalities. I am the one extension specialist in water resources for Rutgers, so I deal with all those municipalities, well, except one I don't like, but most of them I deal with. And I only have 8 full-time staff. In the summer, we actually have anywhere between 10 to 20 full-time student interns over the summer. Now, 95% of our waterways are impaired. New Jersey's impervious cover is about 15% statewide. So if you know anything about Tom Schuler, he says once you get beyond 10%, your waterways are impaired. So we've been screwed for quite a while in New Jersey. We get hammered by hurricanes. We get hammered by nor'easters. The 100-year storm comes once every couple of years in New Jersey. We got lots of harmful algal blooms, not just in our lakes, but in our waterways. And there's this thing called climate change. You might have heard of that. It's actually real. It's occurring in New Jersey. Sea levels rising, more intense storm events. Yeah, so we're a mess. And that's really kind of what we're about. So I started Rutgers in 2002. I remember giving a talk to farmers about 95% of the waterways being impaired. And then, you know, the state went ahead and passed all these great regulations. In 2004, we got new stormwater rules. Stormwater rules that required you to infiltrate water, to remove TSS and still manage the water quantity. The MS4 rules came out. Later on, we passed a fertilizer law that banned use of phosphorus fertilizer in residential commercial lawns, you know. And then in 2021, the new stormwater rules came out and actually requires people to use green infrastructure for all new development, right? So here we are 20 years later, still 95% of our waterways are impaired. So people ask me, you know, Chris, why do you still have a job? 20 years, you really didn't seem to accomplish much. But the answer is we keep developing New Jersey. We get a lot more people, a lot more development, and things haven't gotten worse. So I take credit for that. So some insight to the problem, right? So we have these great stormwater regulations. They're really good regulations, and they're trying to expand them to incorporate redevelopment. We have a lot of redevelopment in New Jersey. New Jersey will be at build out. We'll be the first state to reach build out, and I think it's going to happen next Tuesday, maybe something like that. So we have a lot of problems with building and warehouses going up, things like that. But we've got great stormwater regulations for that, but that's not fixing our waterways, right? So we really need to go in and retrofit historic development. Anything that was built before 1983 in New Jersey has no stormwater management at all. Anything that was built before 2004, the stormwater management is inferior to what it should be. The best way to retrofit with green infrastructure. What we found at Rutgers over the last 20 years is how green infrastructure goes in is you need some local champion, a local advocate. And then the problem is we don't have those local advocates. So that's what I'm going to talk about today is creating them. You guys all know what green infrastructure is. We used to build these big detention basins in New Jersey at the bottom of the hill, and all the stormwater would run down the hill, fill the basin up, and then would let the water out slowly in the basin, remove very little pollution, just control the water volume, held it back for a little while, and then release more water after the storm event. But now we're scattering these green infrastructure practices throughout the entire development, capturing rainwater where it lands before it becomes stormwater runoff, infiltrating it. I wish I had type A soils in New Jersey. We're mostly C and Ds. And when we do have Bs, the developers tell us they're Ds so they don't have to infiltrate, which is kind of funny. Trying to absorb water, reuse water, all the great practices. I saw the, I guess Massachusetts has a watershed planning tool to develop watershed management plans. And she was going through a lot of the BMPs, and all the ones on here are what we typically use. We list rain gardens as first because people like those the best. We used to try to get people to put in bioretention systems, but they don't want to put bio anything in their front yard. But when we told them Rutgers University will give them the free rain garden, they got all excited about that, you know, so it's pretty good. So green infrastructure has a serious role in New Jersey. All major development in New Jersey, any development more than 1 acre, has to use green infrastructure as their first means of controlling stormwater runoff. And that green infrastructure can only take drainage area from about 2.5 acres, nothing more. So you have a lot of practices now scattered throughout the development. We've got 21 communities in New Jersey that have combined sewers. So when you flush your toilet, it goes in the pipe. When it rains, it goes in the same pipe. You get more than a ½ inch of rain, that pipe overflows slurry of human waste and rainwater into local waterways, into the streets, into people's basements. I know it sounds medieval, but it's happening today in New Jersey. We actually do have long-term control plans now that are being passed, and all these combined sewer overflow outfalls will be eliminated within the next 40 years. Oh, hooray. We use a lot of green infrastructure to keep the stormwater from getting into those combined systems. And then the other part is this voluntary basis. Towns start putting this stuff in because they have flooding issues. They want to be environmentally friendly. So we try to help them with that at Rutgers. So we have a pretty serious role. We educate a lot of municipal officials, elected officials, and we heard that a little bit yesterday in the talk. The problem with that is those mayors eventually leave office. In New Jersey, mostly they get indicted and get sent away, but eventually you get new people. So we try to educate the public works people, and the head of the township manager who's in charge of the money usually stay between administrations. So we also educate the professionals, landscape architects, the engineers, the planners. We work with CSO communities trying to help them design projects to get projects in the ground. We have programs to create local champions, and then we actually do a lot of work with communities to do planning and install projects. So today I'm going to talk a little bit more about this local champions idea. So we realized in New Jersey that we have a lot of loudmouth people in Jersey. I've never been to Jersey, and they go to these planning board meetings, they scream and yell, and they yell, but they don't really have a lot of knowledge. So we said, we have a lot of advocates in the state, but they really don't know anything about green infrastructure. So maybe we could teach them about green infrastructure so they can advocate for it. So the idea is to train people who want to be these green infrastructure champions. And here's three of them here, Cheryl Reardon, Nathaniel Syjak, and Laura McBride. So Cheryl and Nathaniel live in the rural parts of New Jersey. There actually are rural parts of New Jersey. Northwest part of the state, very forested, and the southern part of the state, lots of agriculture. So Cheryl's down south, Nathaniel's up north. Laura McBride lives in one of the coastal communities, one of the very affluent coastal communities. So it's very easy for them to care about green infrastructure. So we don't just train these people, though. We also train, there's different slides. Okay, we also train people that are in the cities. So we have folks in Newark that I've been working with, and they've been taking the class. So Newark is the biggest city in New Jersey. There's about 10% white, 90% minority population. Very much environmental justice issues throughout the city. And we've trained folks to understand about green infrastructure. Kim Gaddy and Nicole Miller, two Black women I work with, wonderful people. 10 years ago, they knew nothing about green infrastructure. Now they get up and talk about it like they invented it. So these are the people that we want to support. We want to be behind. Very good people. So this is the program in a nutshell. 10 training sessions. We start on January 12th of 2024. They're all virtual. It's Friday morning from 10 a.m. to noon, every other Friday for however long it takes to take 20 classes. Okay, so you log on. Usually people log on about 9:30, start asking me questions for about a half an hour. We go till about noon, and then we take questions however long people want to ask questions for. It's free. It's all paid for by the William Penn Foundation, Dodge Foundation, Sea Grant. We have people from all over the country taking the class. So a lot of people from Maine took it last year, some people from Massachusetts. We got a certified champion in Puerto Rico, where we hope to hold our next meeting. See if that works. So I have professional staff who work for me, who help support the program. We provide networking opportunities. We had a big conference last year and invited all the certified champions to the conference. If you take more than 5 classes, we certify you. So you come to the conference, you learn from each other, right? And I heard yesterday somebody saying the best way to get farmers to do something is have another farmer tell them to do it. So it's the same thing here, right? You get these people talking to each other. How did you do it in your town? Here's how I did it in my town. And you're really sharing a lot of ideas. And then we also provide assistance in grant writing and submission of grants. A lot of groups want to get funding, but don't know how to do it. So here's some of the classes. We have a class on identifying projects. And we have a class on moving from planning to implementation. I don't know how many of you have those beautiful 9-step watershed restoration plans sitting on your shelf in your office collecting dust. I mean, they're great plans, but I only use the last chapter. It has all the projects in it, So we've been trying to get people to take those plans off the shelf and start implementing them. So really, how do you do that? How do you take that step? And we talk to folks a lot about that. We talk to people a lot about maintenance. Everybody cares about green infrastructure maintenance. Oh my God, green infrastructure, you have to maintain it. As if there's nothing else in the world you have to maintain. It's only green infrastructure, right? So we talk about that, what the real requirements are, and we talk about regulations. And of course, this fella, he's our most environmentally sound president, Richard Nixon. He signed the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the OSHA. He vetoed the Clean Water Act, I think 3 or 4 times, but eventually he signed it. But we talk about regulations, the federal regulation, and we talk about state regulations. We're encouraging other states that are participating in this program to maybe take this day and have this class on their own and talk about their own state regulations as part of this, right? We have a whole class on Sustainable Jersey. Sustainable Jersey is a program in our state where you do certain actions and you get points. And when you get a certain number of points, you get bronze certified or silver certified or gold certified. And the township puts this up on their website. We're a sustainable community, gold certified. Very proud of that. Of the 565 municipalities in our state, we have about 450 of them are in this program. So we went ahead and we added green infrastructure to their point system. So if they do different green infrastructure planning and practices, they get points. So that gets these people in to be excited about this too. We do a lot of stuff in schools. Okay, so how do you do green infrastructure projects at schools? How do you talk to the superintendent, the principal, the science teacher? How do you get the kids involved? Now, why do we do things at schools? And people think, well, it's education. We think of the kids as free labor. And they're closer to the ground. It's easier for them to plant. So we use them a lot like that, and maybe they'll learn something too. Everybody should know how to build a rain garden. If you don't, you should take this class. We teach you how to design and build a rain garden. We teach you how to retrofit those big, ugly grass detention basins and naturalize them so they're more environmentally friendly. They provide wildlife habitat, and they also remove more pollution. We have also master plans that we do. One rain garden at the municipal complex isn't going to do anything, but when you have a master plan, you figure out where you can put the porous asphalt, the cistern, the bioswale, and really think about managing all the impervious cover on that site. You can create a master plan. You can slowly implement it over time. And then we also talk about green infrastructure and climate change, right? So green infrastructure, we typically design green infrastructure practices for that water quality storm, 1.25 inches of rain over 2 hours. In New Jersey, what we're trying to do is design for the 2-year storm, which is about 3 inches of rain over 24 hours. Okay, so we also talk about how that's not going to solve the climate change problem, but we can couple green infrastructure with gray infrastructure. And we talk a lot about that and how to do that. So that's a lot what that class is about. The whole goal with extension is to increase knowledge and awareness. So that's what we're trying to do with the folks that are taking this class. We're trying to give them a skill set so they can advocate for green infrastructure and be a linkage between me and the town. So if they need me, they can call me and I can come help them. But I can't be in 565 towns. But now we're creating an army of people who go out there and kind of preach the same thing that we've been preaching at the university for a long time. And then try to identify opportunities to get funding. Long term, we want practices everywhere. Somebody was talking about prioritizing practices in one of the talks. I'm like, prioritize? I'm in New Jersey. We need to put practices everywhere we possibly can. The priority is, will you let us put it there? Then that's the first place we start, right? So that's how we prioritize. Green infrastructure should be the standard for every community. We did a project with the community and, now they want to put rain gardens everywhere, which is important. Localized flooding can be reduced. We're talking about managing the first few inches of rain. We get 2 inches of rain in New Jersey. Roads are closed, schools canceled. So if we can stop that, we can actually really improve people's quality of life. I tell people all the time that if we get more than 2 inches of rain, there's 3 bridges I can cross to get from my house to work, and 2 get flooded out and get 2 inches of rain. So if it's a Friday night and I forget about that and I don't leave work early enough, I don't get home in time. The kids don't get pizza, they don't get to Taekwondo, and then my quality of life is ruined for the weekend, right? So it's all about quality of life. Water quality improvements, of course, and then communities becoming more resilient. So we actually have 606 champions now over the last 5 years. I'd updated the slide, but I guess we didn't include that in here. We have different people who've done this work. So Ann and Jane are environmental commissioners in Caldwell. They took the class, we helped them write a grant. They got $20,000 to do green infrastructure planning and put in a couple of projects. Last week, they just got another $70,000 from DEP's 319H program to put in more projects. Laura McBride is the Deal Lake Watershed Alliance. She created a new Watershed Alliance to protect this lake that she loves so much. They just got a ton of money to retrofit a mall with green infrastructure practices to help protect the lake. Britta and Karen, they were the Save Barnegat Bay Watershed Association. Barnegat Bay is a big deal in New Jersey. It's where all the rich people go to water ski. So we have to protect that. It's very important. So Save Barnegat Bay actually goes into schools and they educate kids about rain gardens. And it's really a nice program. Dorianne Kerber, she's my local crazy person. She is an environmental commissioner in Milltown, but she works in all the towns around that, trying to get them put in green infrastructure. She works with the Lions Clubs, getting kids involved. So a lot of really cool stuff she's doing. Ilya's with the Evesham Environmental Commission. She got her entire town to start taking these classes. So she's really trying to incorporate green infrastructure in every aspect of the community. And then we got this fellow named Dave Sequoia. So he's a municipal planner, zoning officer. So this class, we have environmental commissioners taking it. We have Rutgers master gardeners taking it, environmental stewards taking it. We have people who just care about the environment. We have engineers and planners take the class. So lots of people taking this course, trying to improve what they know about green infrastructure. So this fellow took the class. He wrote some grants. He got his entire township. His whole public works department is taking the class now. This is the group where we built this rain garden you can see here in front of the building. And what wound up happening with this, we had some 319H money, and we went to the town. We said, let's put a rain garden in front of your municipal building. They said, we're really not interested in that. So we told the mayor, okay, we'll take the money. We'll go to the neighboring town, Montgomery, and we'll see if they want to use it. And that town, and he said, well, no, wait, you're not giving our money to that town. So all of a sudden they were interested, right? So we built a rain garden there. The public works guys helped us build it. Once they figured out what we're doing, they helped us redesign it so they could mow around the edges. Great project. This is what it looks like here on the right-hand side. Every time they send out a calendar, a flyer, or anything from the town, it's got the rain garden picture on the cover or on the back. It's always in it, the rain garden they never wanted. And then these guys called me about a year after they put this in. They said, we've got a flooding problem. Or wondering if one of those rain gardens might work. Could you come talk to us about it? We'd like to use that. So we gave them another tool for their toolbox that they can use to deal with stormwater management. So it's a really, really great thing. So we're doing a lot of things now. We're trying to have some advanced courses, a lot on trying to link green with gray to deal with extreme storm events. Living shorelines is a big issue in New Jersey. We're trying to do floodplain restoration, stormwater wetlands. We offered a class this year on biofilter wetlands for homeowners. Homeowners who want rain gardens and they won't infiltrate. Well, maybe you can put a wetland at your house. So we're talking about doing things like that. We're actually, after yesterday's talk, we're going to offer a class on soil health, because apparently that's very important. I heard yesterday. So that's something we're going to do. So we can learn stuff from here too. So a youth program, a bunch of champions want to get together and create a youth program. We also had gotten some funding dedicated to fund champions. So we got about $100,000 in money to support champions in urban communities to put in demonstration projects. So that money came in and we gave that out to 10 different communities, and we're going to get another batch of money this year. So we're trying to help these people, empower these people so that the town recognizes them as a champion. And when they want to do something with green infrastructure, they call them to the table to get their help. Okay. We have online learning tools, some hands-on workshops. These are all the things that we're working on now. You guys are all invited to go to our website at water.rutgers.edu by November 15th. The registration should be up. Your stakeholders could take the class. It's free. And you could change your environment to look into something like this. That's it. Thanks for having me.
Chris, that was really inspiring. And I think Maryland thinks it's a leading stormwater state, but I think New Jersey takes the hat. And I think in Maryland, we wouldn't be calling bioretention systems pits of death if we had Chris there. So if anyone has any questions for Malcolm, Malcolm is our Massachusetts 319 grant coordinator. Please ask Malcolm about the project, how the funding occurred. Then Chris and Andrew are both willing to entertain some questions. So if anyone would like to start, I'd be happy to field some questions.
Great presentation, both of you. Question for Chris, the 20 green infrastructure courses that you're going to start in January, are those all like progressive? Or are they some of them duplicative?
No, the way, this is all right. Can you hear me? It's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, the way we designed it was you could just jump in and take a course at any time. So we have a lot of public works guys coming in and taking the course about retrofitting detention basins because they don't want to mow them anymore. So they just come and take that class. I got a lot of people taking classes, just a rain garden design class. They're really interested in that. The idea is you could pick and choose. You could take all the classes. If you just take 5 of them, we certify you anyway. You get a nice hat like this, and you get to go to our conferences, we have special for them. So it's no process there. So you miss a class, if you sign up for a class, you miss it. We also record it. So we'll send you the recording. It's much better to be there because I'm much funnier in person online. So.
Back.
Hi, so someone from Zoom land was wondering, Chris, if New Jersey pays champions a stipend.
No, could you repeat your question, please?
Sure, so somebody from our Zoom right now was wondering if New Jersey pays your champions a stipend.
Do you pay them a stipend?
Do I pay what?
Stipend,
Oh, no, no, anybody who takes the champions class does not get a stipend. We do training in Newark with Newark Greenworks, which is a program there that's we actually train using the National Green Infrastructure Certification Program. Those people all get paid I think $20 an hour to take the class. It's 35 hours of class. They pay them to take their test. So there are certain programs we do have in the urban communities, the environmental justice communities. We actually pay people to attend these things, but not the champions. That's not available for that. So.
Hi, Sue from Rhode Island. I wanted to ask Chris in New Jersey, you had on your slide that you mentioned that you provide grant writing support. In the context of municipalities, could you just expand on that a little bit? Like, will you write the whole thing for somebody or?
Oh, yeah. So grants are interesting. I could write a grant on my way back to the room in the elevator. I mean, write so many grants. A lot of the grants that are out there, like 319H is a formula. So last year we submitted, like I personally wrote 12 319H grants in my state last year. We submitted 2 from Rutgers and the other 10 went out from our project partners, and 6 of them got funded, which is great because we're a subcontractor in every one of those grants. And so the ones that our name isn't on gets funded too, because DEP can't give us all the grant money, even though I asked for it. So they have to spread it around and make it look like they're giving to other people. So, but yeah, we help people write grants and try to teach them how to write their own grants so we don't have to keep helping them. But there's a lot of standard grants that come out every year. So there's just a formula to write it, and we know the exact wording to put in it. And then we list ourselves either as a partner or we provide a letter of support. And for some reason, when they see my name on it, doesn't scare them away. They tend to maybe helps them a little bit, I guess.
Chris, congratulations on a great program and an excellent presentation. We have something in Minnesota that's called Minnesota Water Stewards, and it's a similar training program. Our program has kind of an expectation that the participants are actually going to build some sort of a project, like they're going to implement something as they come through the process, sort of like, what's the state going to get back for its investment in, or these local governments that are sponsoring the program. So I just wonder if, I'm imagining you don't have that requirement because you didn't mention it, but I'm just wondering about that.
Yeah. So do we have a requirement that they have to do so many service hours after they take the class? No, we don't. We originally offered this class 5 years ago as, well, let's see if this will work. We were hoping to get maybe 8 or 9 people certified. The first year we got 35, and then it just kept going up from there. Now we got 600. So our commitment to those people, though, is that if they want to do something in their town, need help, we're there to support them. So I really don't need them to require them to do projects. Of the 600, maybe 30 to 60 of them are very active. So I'm doing a lot just with those groups. So I don't know how many more I can handle. I'm hoping the guy from Puerto Rico calls us. I'd love to go down there and help him with a project.
Yeah, I could vouch that Chris can write grants because every time I review a NIF-WIF grant or whatever, Chris is in there. And I have a question for both of you, actually. I'd like to know, how deep is the trench before that you can avoid having to build something? And I also would like to know, when you cover it, are you putting a crate on it, or you cover the whole thing and you let the pipes underground do the work? And then for Chris, I want to know, you mentioned cisterns. I want to know, are you talking about a few years back, we did a lot of rain barrel stuff in New Jersey. Are you talking about separate cisterns? And if you are, I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
So just on the question of total depth, the practice differs from municipality. It's somewhat of a local call, but it's rough. As I remember, 6.5 feet. Sometimes they can put an additional layer of stone at the bottom after digging to 6.5 feet, so that no worker is in a trench that's deeper than 5.5 feet. And so roughly those are the numbers. And the other question, I'm sorry, on the, oh. There's no grade. No, so it's receiving water from the entire catchment area of the adjacent catch basin rather than the land right above it. So the trench itself is covered, it's paved over. So when it's finished, it's just doing its work underground, as you said, yeah.
So you don't have to bring up either.
There's no.
Okay, so rain barrels, we love rain barrels. We used to do these rain barrel workshops. People would come in and they would build a rain barrel. They drilled a hole, they had caulk in their hair. There's always somebody trying to squeeze 2 rain barrels in a Prius, which they don't fit in a Prius. I got to follow you home my pickup truck. And it were great things. Now, the rain barrel does very little for stormwater management. We refer to it as a gateway drug for stormwater management, because once you have a rain barrel, then you want a rain garden, you want a porous asphalt driveway, you want a green roof on your house, you start getting crazy, you know. But when we talk about rainwater harvesting, we're talking about cisterns. We're talking about 500-gallon tanks, 1,000-gallon tanks, 5,000-gallon tanks. We put a cistern on a public works building, which was 10,000 gallons. It collects water from the huge rooftop, and then the high school is right next door to that, so they use that water for the nonprofit car wash. And all the water goes down the concrete channel, goes into a rain garden, and the rain garden removes 95% of the surfactants. And I know that because we built little rain gardens behind my building. I made my students wash cars and dump the soapy water in it, and we did a whole experiment and wrote a paper on it. So that's what we want to do. So the only problem with rainwater harvesting is you have to use the water between the storm events. There are a lot of people saying, "Oh, we could put a cistern here." I'm like, "Well, what are you use the water for?" "Well, I don't know, but it'll look really cool." Well, yes, it'll look really cool, but it'll fill once, you'll never use it. So you have to have a use for the water. That's the problem. So.
I have a question as a moderator. I'll exercise my prerogative for Andrew and Malcolm. Urban retrofit's a real challenge, and it's really costly. And you have a phosphorus problem, which you're addressing partially with street sweeping and advanced sweeping devices. You're putting these practices underground. And how do you think about long-term performance of these practices over time? And when do you get a roll-off? And how do you analyze the life cycle costs of these systems over time, since you're putting in potentially thousands of these things underground?
Yes, well, we're thinking about exactly that range of questions. We don't claim to have solved those issues. We're hoping to get funding to help us monitor these things over time. So yeah. So yeah, I mean, you can imagine that the effective storage of these devices decreases over time, but we don't know the time scale. And I think it's for further investigation.
Any other questions from the?
Yeah, my question is a little bit related to yours, Robert, and that's about O&M. So Andy, like what type of O&M are the towns doing once those trenches are put into place? And because the DPWs are putting them in and they're in the street, I'm assuming they're doing the O&M. And then likewise for Chris, I have the same question with all of those lovely, green infrastructure practices. Who's in charge of O&M and who's checking to make sure it happens?
Yes, no, absolutely. It is definitely the town responsibility. Sometimes they farm out O&M, so the folks that do catch basin cleaning are often contracted by the city rather than DPW staff. But it's sort of incorporated into catch basin cleaning. So the system effectively is working as a system. So still a lot of the work of sediment capture and effective phosphorus capture is done by the sump in the catch basin. So at the time of cleaning, the pipe is also inspected for obstructions, and because it has a port at the sort of distal end, it can be flushed out if it's been occluded with material. But but there is definitely an O&M plan, and yeah, and it's part of. It should become part of the routine practice of the DPWs.
Yeah, everything we build is maintenance free. If you. No, I mean, we won't build a project unless we have a memorandum of agreement with the property owner. And that outlines what Rutgers is gonna do. And we'll come back a year later and help them maintain it the first time, so they know what they have to do. But they take ownership of it, they take maintenance of it, and we don't put it in unless they sign that. And then what happens is when the mayor changes or Public Works changes, they call me up and they say, Chris, you're gonna come maintain this rain garden. And I email them a copy of that agreement that their previous mayor signed, is to know your previous mayor agreed that you would do it, and send that to them. So that's kind of how we do these things. Anything in the public right of way that the town's taking credit for, the town maintains. So all these CSO projects, green infrastructure, they're gonna have to be maintained by the permittee because it's part of their long-term control plan. So right now they're doing a lot of training of people. And the idea with that is great because you're training people who live in the city, right? And they're gonna be maintaining these things, getting paid. So the money's staying in the city. What typically happens in New Jersey, if we're doing any kind of green infrastructure projects in Newark, they would hire an outside contractor from one of the neighboring towns, somebody maintain it from one of the neighboring towns, one of the wealthy white communities. So the money leaves the city. So we want to keep the money in the city so that people can use it, and they go downtown, they use it downtown, so the money stays in the community. And that's how you build equity. That's how you build wealth in your community. So that's one thing we're really trying to target as we move forward. It's not just thinking about managing stormwater and reducing combined soil overflows, but how do we increase wealth in some of these economic areas that really could use it, these environmental justice communities that we've been abusing for years and years and years. So.
Any additional questions? One final question? One more, please. Thank you.
Hi, okay. Hi, just hello, I'm Lee. I grew up Jersey Shore coastal, so I can attest to everything Chris is saying about bridges growing up whenever it rained, they were flooded and you couldn't get anywhere. So, and now I actually live in Somerville. So I live in that highly impervious city that Andy mentioned in the Mystic River watershed. I guess my question, Chris, probably is most relevant to you, but Andy, you might be able to respond to this too, and just talk about who you're working with in the communities. And I'm thinking about, like, you mentioned about public works, just when they're going through the green infrastructure program, or even again, working on these stormwater trenches, navigating, anyone who's going to go through additional training, increases in pay. So I'm just thinking about, like, working with unions and I don't know, just what are you experiencing as far as, like, I don't know, any challenges there? And not necessarily with the unions themselves. I think also sometimes there's some hurdles with municipalities maybe not wanting to incentivize workers in some ways, because it does mean having to increase pay when workers become more trained or more highly skilled. So just wonder if you could speak to that at all.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's a lot of question. So we do a lot of work in very urban areas. And when we go into urban areas, they don't know me from Adam, so we have to latch on to a local organization. So one woman, Kim Gaddy, who I met about 10 years ago when I first went to Newark, we were talking and chatting, and she really liked me a lot. So she brought me into a meeting. Now, everybody in that meeting trusted Kim, so immediately trusted me. Her trust the trust they had for her was automatically put on my shoulders. So they trusted me, and we started doing stuff with that community. So that became one way of getting into the community. These towns that we're working with, for example, the city of Newark, they've got huge budgets and huge problems. So a lot of times New Jersey DEP 10 years ago would not give them any 319H money because they just thought it would just be throwing money into a black hole. They would never see where it was going to go. So we convinced the state to give me the money at Rutgers so we could do projects in Newark because they could hold my feet to the fire. If I didn't do what I said I was going to do, then they wouldn't give me any more money. So we got into Newark in 2011, started doing projects, getting rain gardens in the ground. And then the DEP started trusting Newark and started funding them for different projects. They just gave me $1.2 million to do a Green Street project in Newark. They gave me actually money for design and construction. So we're going to work with the city of Newark, the engineering department, to put out the specs, but Rutgers is going to be the one who subcontracts the contractor. Okay, so that way they don't have to deal with all that stuff there. But we have to put everything out to bid, just like everything else. So it's not there's no shortcuts around that. We also have to try to hire minority-owned businesses. So in that process, we're trying to create a women-owned, minority-owned business who does green infrastructure construction and maintenance. So we're actually trying to create that now, working with a few people, another university at that entrepreneur center, and trying to make that happen. So we have groups that we can go to for at least part of that contract. So that's a lot of what we're trying to do now. The public works guys are fun to work with. They get pulled in every direction. But this is something when they're out building a rain garden with us or bioswale, they've never done that before. And they're really talented people and they get excited about doing new things. So it's a lot of fun working with them. And I love bringing my students out because my students, you know, they learn from these egghead professors all day, but when they're out in the field, you know, for a day with the guy in the backhoe and a couple of construction guys, they can learn a lot more in that day than they can learn a whole semester. It's amazing, you know, so it's really important to kind of expose them to that too. So that's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Could we give our speakers a big hand? Thank you very much, Andrew, Malcolm, and Chris.
I think we have a break now, so.
Yeah.
That's like
I mean, yeah. That's totally fine, yeah. I mean, obviously can't put it on the agenda, but we can make an announcement about it. I'll make an announcement about it at the beginning of this next session here, if somebody wants to do it over there, and then during the networking poster session, chat. And then, yeah, it seemed to be a great turnout. Yeah, so yeah, that's more than welcome to get that going. Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Let me pull up the agenda for them. I know I'm trying to put in like at least 15 to 30-minute breaks in between every session.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah, the discussions, the public conversations.
Totally. Okay, yeah. So we have 3 presenters, Marlene, Josh, and Ann.
Yep.
So it's gonna be, I would do 15 minutes each for a presentation, and then I'll leave 15 minutes at the end for the whole group to ask any of them questions. What we're gonna do is we're gonna have the mics on. I'm trying to speak in there. We're gonna have all 3 presenters come up here and sit here, and then present, and then present, and then present any questions. I'll load the presentations up, and I will switch presentations after each presenter. And the only thing you need to know.
Yeah, exactly. I think you've been doing a great job, Henry. Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah. Yeah, I know, yeah. Yeah, I know, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I would be, so, yeah, yeah. I'll look for this stuff right now. I can do that. Yeah, yeah. I did.
Urban community engagement, right? Yes. Alrighty, so. You have it as a.
Yep, I do.
You want as a, you have a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
I was like, we could do PDF, but it's.
No, because I got some animations. So, yeah. There you go. Yeah, it's gonna make me unlock it. It's password protected.
Yes.
Is it not showing up?
How are you doing? What are you talking about?
You see, this should give it a second. Oh, there it is. Excellent, excellent.
And yeah, just that one there.
Because I left my phone down there, I didn't want to come down and.
Yeah. And then you're gonna have to bring it over to the corner over there for Marianne, because you're doing Zoom on this session.
Okay, okay.
Open it. So make sure they're all open and then.
Yeah.
And third one. Okay, great. Excellent. So they are all there. Perfect.
Okay,
great. And then, so I'll come up in between each presentation and it's already open. I mean, if you can do it faster than I can, we just
Okay.
press present and it
Okay.
automatically should mirror over there. So that's it.
Okay, wonderful.
This is Marlene's, right? And then it should have the speaker notes here and then, they don't see that.
Okay.
And then there's a little thing here.
Oh, wow. I'm gonna get out of this and inject this real quick. Boop.
And then you can use this to.
Oh, okay.
Change slides, right, press the space bar.
Perfect.
With that, I think it's time for.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is the final session before posters and drinks. So here we go. My name is Steve Hopkins. I'm the Iowa DNR 319 coordinator. I'll be moderating this session on urban community engagement. And no, it's not a joke that someone from a farm state is going to be moderating a session about urban stuff. We actually do have urban practices and programs in Iowa. I happen to know two of the people quite well, and I'm going to give brief introductions so they have more time to talk. And so I'll read the introductions right now, and then I'll let them take it away. So we're starting with Marlene Krajewski, who is an environmental analyst with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and you manage the 319 grant in the state of Connecticut, right? And my colleague from Iowa, within our 319 program, is also here, Josh Balk. He's a watershed coordinator with our Iowa DNR 319 program located in the Dry Run Creek watershed in Cedar Falls, Iowa. And then our third speaker is Ann Staudt with Iowa State University, who's an environmental engineer who will be giving her presentation. Well, you'll find out soon. And just so they have lots of time to talk, I'll make sure that they get their cutoff time so they don't cut into other people's talks. But with that, Marlene, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. As Steve said, I'm with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, which I'll refer to as DEP throughout the presentation because that's a bit of a mouthful. I'm presenting today on the Urban Waters Initiative in the Mill River Watershed in Connecticut. And I wanted to start with a map of the overall area since we're gathered from all over the country. The Mill River Watershed meets the Long Island Sound, a national estuary of significance in New Haven, Connecticut, which is on the coastline, about 2 hours from New York City, about 2 hours from Boston. Connecticut DEP has an environmental justice community mapper based on the Connecticut general statutes, in which we define environmental justice communities in two ways. One of them is with the census data, with census blocks that are 30% or higher of below the federal poverty 200% threshold. And the other way is distressed municipalities, which takes into consideration other aspects like education levels of the citizens and other income statistics. So in the orange, you can see the census blocks that are EJ communities, and the kind of brighter red are the distressed municipalities. There's 25 of them across the state. And there's also a light pink in some of the areas, and those are municipalities that have met the distressed municipalities definition within the past 5 years, but that currently aren't, but we still like to consider them because as easily as they're no longer distressed, they can become distressed again. So once again, our project takes place in this circled area, and to get a little bit closer, Fairhaven is the neighborhood of New Haven where this project took place. It's in that 5 year in between where it was a distressed municipality, but it's no longer as of 2023, but it also has those EJ census block groups within that area. And that is part of the reason that it was selected for this project. So how did this project come to be? There was a staff member at DEP who was really interested by the New York City Bronx River Alliance, which in 1997 took a small amount of money, invested that, and now works with over $20 million, $20 million, 200 volunteers across the Bronx River. My colleagues saw similarities between the Bronx River and the Mill River, including strong community organizations that already existed and strong participation in the watershed that could be leveraged further. Connecticut DEP utilized an EPA grant worth $100,000 to start this initiative. The first step was to create a steering community in the Mill River watershed. It was a subset of the existing Mill River Watershed Association, which has an approved watershed-based plan. The steering committee was made up by a chairperson who was a member of the Watershed Association, as well as a professor at local Quinnipiac University. There were two Deep staff members who sat on the steering committee, who sat as more of an advisory role to make sure that the group stayed on task, on topic. And members of the Mill River Watershed Association were also invited to steering committee meetings. The Mill River runs through several towns before entering a densely urban landscape in New Haven with combined sewer overflows, and stormwater runoff from a lot of highways, from roadways. And Deep and the Mill River Watershed Association saw that, like the Bronx River, the Mill River has a potential to be a valuable resource if we cared about it the same way we care about pristine waterways. But first, that would require increased access to public spaces and increased education for the community. So the goal of this project was to increase organizational capacity in the watershed. There were two projects that were funded with the $100,000 grant, which were selected by the steering community, the steering group, sorry. The first is the community science project that was granted to the Southwest Conservation District, which is one of 5 soil and water conservation districts in Connecticut. They received $57,218 and provided another $12,000 in match. They had 3 parts of their project: supporting sound school students, opening a water quality lab in the watershed, and conducting a floatable trash analysis. And I'll get back to the second part later on in the presentation. So the first part of the project was supporting the sound school. The sound school is a vocational high school in Connecticut. It's part of the New Haven public school system. It's one of 19 of these agricultural and aquacultural schools in Connecticut, and it's the first of the aquacultural kind. The project had students generate scientific data on the waterways near their school and use it as part of their classwork. They also had high school students act as water quality ambassadors to create awareness with the younger students in the public school system in hopes of continuing enrollment in the school. The second part was the opening of a water quality lab in Hamden, Connecticut, which is in the Mill River watershed. In this, the Southwest Conservation District worked with Save the Sound. The lab is hoped to be used by volunteers, school groups, local universities to collect data and make it more accessible, to get data from more sources, and to also operate in an affordable way, as the lab planned not to generate profit, but to either have the students or the communities only pay for the cost of the lab analysis and not any additional prices. The third part was a floatable trash analysis, partnered with the Urban Resources Initiative, Emerge and Lots of Fish, in which booms were installed on the Mill River to collect floatable trash when there were combined sewer overflows, in order to identify what were common types of trash and how do we get rid of that. One thing that the community found a lot of was the small alcohol bottles. So one thought that was floated was to create an incentive program to make sure those pieces of trash end up in the right place, like a bottle return fee or something like that. This project involved community members in a lot of ways. For one, it provided temporary jobs, it generated work experience for the community, and it developed interpersonal relationships. We were hoping that people would be able to maybe use people they met as resources for looking for other jobs, as references and things like that. In addition, students were able to use some of the cleaner trash that was collected in parts of an art project. Which you can see in this picture here, they put together educational pieces about water using like beads that they found in the water, for example. We didn't give them the little alcohol bottles. As with every project, there were obstacles. For one, a significant drought this past summer meant that the booms couldn't be removed from the water, and so less floatable trash was available for the beautiful art. On the other hand, there was also less trash generated because there were fewer combined sewer overflows. Staff changes at some of the partner groups meant that they couldn't participate in the way they intended. Originally, another nonprofit was going to work with the sound school to teach the children more, but unfortunately, they fell out of the plan. But still, this project has a lot of future promise. For one, the Sound School is currently planning a science fair with the water quality data at the central focus of the fair. The lab is continued to be used to generate additional data. They're working with Quinnipiac University and the community. And the floatable material collection is being continued. The project partners, even though they had a drought, they said that they would continue that process beyond the contract of this project. The second part of the project was community outreach, engagement, and leadership with Save the Sound Incorporated, a local nonprofit in Connecticut and New York and parts, I believe, of Massachusetts as well. You can see some of their work here. It's spread out a lot on the coastline, and it ranges from healthy waters initiatives to legal action. They were given just shy of $40,000 for their portion of the project, and their project went in a chronological order of identifying and hiring community leaders, conducting a photo voice method presentation, and then generating project proposals to be continued. So in the first and maybe most important part, Save the Sound worked with community representatives to hire 2 Fairhaven residents to become paid community leaders. They put out a job posting, they received 5 applications, and from there they chose 2 people from the community to serve as community leaders. Unfortunately, one of them did have prior commitments and wasn't able to continue her role, but the second community leader did an amazing job doing the rest of the parts. And I think the quote that I put up here, which I'm sorry is probably small for those in the back, is very valuable. Community leader Xochitl Garcia talks about how she doesn't always see EJ leaders that look like her. And she says, being part of the new EJ wave, I constantly think about who needs to be seen, heard, and addressed. I represent my neighborhood and should be one of many sources of information. And I think it's important that she recognizes that she's also not representative of everyone. Community leader Xochitl Garcia led the photo voice method, which was a month-long process involving 13 volunteers that the community leader gathered, a photographer, and another staff member from Save the Sound. And they did 10 training sessions, an orientation session, and then went throughout the neighborhood of Fairhaven and collected pictures within the 5 themes that they selected. Those 5 themes are abandoned buildings, green and blue spaces, homelessness, a safe space, and trash travels, which were determined to represent Fairhaven, the issues that are faced, and things that could be done to solve the problems. Using the photos generated, they engaged community members. They held a meeting with 22 additional members to present the photos, show what issues were around in the neighborhood, and from there, the group generated ideas. Once those ideas were compiled, Save the Sound and Xochitl Garcia took that list, defined it a little further, and presented the project ideas to elected officials, environmental groups, Dept, and others. So with this part, there were also obstacles. Once again, staff changes. That one community leader didn't work out. Save the Sound also had people moving around. And we found that during that last step where the community got together and thought of ideas, a lot of them were almost too optimistic, things that maybe can't be done with the amount of money that the 319 grant has, for example. But once again, a lot of successes. There were new partnerships created. We had 2 new groups come out of this, Junta, a Latinx organization for progressive action, and the Central Regional Council of Governments. Additionally, there's a semi-permanent photo voice display at one of the new partners, Junta, and you can also see a GIS map that was created by Save the Sound that has the photos kind of geo-referenced on the map. Additionally, Save the Sound was able to locate local funding to retain community leader Xochitl Garcia, so she's still doing work in the community. And the photos are still being used to generate ideas. Phase 2 ended in October 2022, and phase 2 is currently in progress using 604B funding of a little bit over $113,000. We're once again working with the Southwest Conservation District and Save the Sound, and the project builds on the parts from phase 1, including furthering support of the lab, continuing work at the sound school, offering more training to the Fairhaven community, and taking those project ideas developed in phase 1 to create kind of little project briefs to further them along, hopefully with the goal of implementing in the future with other funding sources. I wanted to thank all of our project partners. I was going to put logos on here, but I thought that was going to be even more overwhelming than the names. We wanted to thank US EPA for flexibility with this funding source, and we're really excited to hear that moving into the future, projects like this that are done in EJ communities are project funding. Save the Sound and Southwest Conservation District did the majority of the work, and they were under a lot more stress because they thought they had a 2-year time frame, but it was actually squished into 8 months. So they really did a lot during a short period of time. And once again, the Mill River Watershed Association created that subset from their organization and did a lot of the work, coming up with the projects that were going to be done as part of this. We also faced, I think, the same issues that a lot of people are facing at Deep. We've had staff turnover. So this project is kind of changed hands a lot of times, and we're excited to see what else it can bring, but we know it's not always as smooth as we expect. My email address is there if anyone wants to contact with questions or comments, and I'll be around after for questions as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Josh Balk, and for the last 8.5 years, I've had the pleasure of focusing on the Dry Run Creek Watershed Improvement Project. For those who haven't visited the great state of Iowa, it's located in northeast Iowa, around the city of Cedar Falls. Dry Run Creek's about a 15,000 acre watershed. And with the community of Cedar Falls, we've kind of noticed growing urbanization of it, usually about 1 to 2% on average each year. So what originally was a predominantly agriculture watershed is becoming more and more urbanized each year. And why we're focusing on Dry Run Creek is has 2 state designated water quality impairments, one for stream biology and another for high levels of bacteria. So in 2005, a coalition of partners pulled together, including the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, our local Natural Resource and Conservation Service office, the US EPA, as well as our Black Hawk Soil and Water Conservation District to try and address this through grant funds and initiatives working with local landowners. As part of that partnership, we identified installing beneficial conservation practices, targeting both stormwater management as well as reducing soil erosion as having a predominant beneficial effect on the stream, as well as an active outreach and education campaign and water monitoring to track progress there. So why are we focusing on stormwater with the biological impairment? We found that really the stormwater runoff that gets to the stream, Dry Run Creek, is a highly flashy stream, being highly urbanized and small in nature. So getting water to infiltrate into the ground naturally, like it would in Iowa's native hydrology system, helps to remove pollutants as well as that flashiness of the stream. So we maybe talked or heard about it in other presentations today, but rain gardens have been a really great opportunity to get community involvement with our urban residents, both homeowners as well as small businesses. And so with rain gardens, we're trying to treat that stormwater runoff on site, usually small scale conservation, but still has a wide variety of benefits to that water quality improvement. Landscape beautification as well as habitat are all part of the project there. So this is a nice infographic to show how rain gardens work. So we have our rain garden in place. When a precipitation event happens, the stormwater runoff is directed towards the rain garden. Because it's a bowl-shaped depression, it'll fill up with a certain amount of water. Excessive water flows away. These rain gardens are designed to handle the 1.25 inch rainfall event, which is about 90% of the rainfall in Iowa. That water that is ponded within the rain garden has a chance to percolate through the upper soil layers, infiltrate, and that's where we can also get the benefits of groundwater recharge. If we're dealing with highly compacted clay soils or tight areas, we might install an under drain to try and ensure that the practice is going to function long term. Because we incorporate native prairie plants, we also have the benefits of transpiration through that vegetation. So rain gardens have been widely utilized throughout our watershed, and each one of these conservation practices is custom tailored to the homeowner to meet their needs based on their landscape, as well as to fit their budget. That's a highly important aspect of the project as well. So in talking with the homeowner, identifying their concerns, their needs, addressing their water quality issues, we come up with a wonderful plan to try and help beautify their landscape as well as improve water quality. We got a lot of these. Okay, jump through these. Okay, so yeah. So how do we install a rain garden? Well, after we have our plan in place, you kind of spray paint out the area so you know what you're doing. Dig down anywhere between 12 to 18 inches deep. Bring in some high quality soils, usually a mix of 75% sand and then up to 25% topsoil and or compost. And then you throw in some mulch and some vegetation. Pretty easy, right? Okay, so Dry Run Creek is a grant funded project. We try and utilize our limited grant dollars the best way possible. And so in trying to do that, we look to try and involve our community as much as possible through our partnerships to make the magic happen. And Dry Run Creek, we've been around for 18 years. So we are very fortunate to have a wide variety of partnerships with local, state, federal groups, as well as NGOs, counties, municipalities, and everyone in between. So this has been a coalition that we've helped to build and utilize over the years. So we were approached back in 2016 when I was only about a year on the job and still learning the ranks of being what a watershed coordinator does. And we were approached by our local university who received a charitable donation from a group. And the intent was to try and get students out and involved, active in their community, having a project that have an environmental benefit. And so through some brainstorming sessions, we decided to try and train students on what rain gardens were, get them involved with the process, and then try and get some conservation on the ground. So we partnered with senior level students in a capstone class, kind of had a pilot project with one of the local instructors there, and it was a success. We were pretty happy with it. It went well. And so we continued it for a couple more semesters while we have those funds available. So all in all, we got over 100 students involved, active and out in the community. But we wanted to do more based on the success of that project. So we looked to our local partnerships to see how we could sustain and continue this going forward. So active partner within our watershed is an initiative called the Green Iowa AmeriCorps Group. This largely was in response to the floods of 2008 that impacted the state of Iowa around the Cedar River. And so it was trying to address climate change, water quality, a bunch of different topics, home, energy efficiency, and resiliency. And so over the last 15 years, that program has grown from just one small area in Cedar Falls to many satellite facilities throughout the state. The one we largely partner with is called the Land and Water Stewards AmeriCorps. So these are folks specifically focusing on soil conservation, water quality. They have summer term members that come on for a few months, get involved. And so what we've kind of done is Rain Garden Fridays, where we get these AmeriCorps members out to try and help us construct and install these conservation practices. We also have still utilized our local college institutions. We have the University of Northern Iowa as well as Hawkeye Community College in the Cedar Valley area. And through our partnerships with educators there, We probably have about 12 different connections or so, I'd say, getting their students out and involved for experiential learning is how we define that. But it's not just for older students. We've actually got grade schools involved in well. A Lego League was an initiative going on in our communities. And in 2018, their theme was hydrology. So I think I gave about 30 different presentations to little kids. And two of the groups decided they wanted to focus on rain gardens. So in partnering with those Lego League groups, we installed rain gardens at two of our local school systems. We didn't necessarily have the kindergartens out there with shovels and pickaxes, but they did help us put the plants in and come up with what we were going to do there. Also great groups that we've utilized, Boys and Girl Scouts of America. A lot of them are looking for service projects, so getting them involved with rain gardens is a great opportunity. But then we also have our extension and outreach Master Gardeners program. We just started roping them in this last year because part of their service does involve volunteerism each year. So that's what we've utilized. But there is a method to this as well that can be replicable elsewhere. So, first ingredient you need is willing landowners, coming up with a plan, implementing that plan, and then afterwards you get to celebrate. So, the important thing is talking with homeowners. You know, that's where our outreach and education comes in, our workshops, mailers, all those things, getting homeowners involved, getting out on site, seeing who has a good, viable area for rain gardens. So one thing I always tell folks up front is if they're looking at this volunteer rain garden as an option, that these are not professional contractors, that a lot of these are students who are holding shovels for the first time. So not to expect the Taj Mahal of rain gardens when we're doing that. So adjusting their expectations is key. But then this also comes to the homeowners having a bit of responsibility. They're required to get all the materials up front, have it on site ready for us, so that when we get the volunteers out there, we can make it happen. But utilizing our local resources, partnerships as well. But probably one of the biggest things that folks don't really think about is what 50 to 100 cubic feet of excavated soils look like and how we're going to utilize that. So that's an important thing we always review. But then comes the magic day when we get the volunteers together to make it happen. So having that plan in place is really key. But providing that training up front is also, so that way they actually understand what we're doing. So this can be a little workshop, a little hour presentation, something like that, or we can do a deep dive as time allows. Coming up with a plan for the homeowners as well, so they have a detailed list of the materials needed, what it's going to look like, so they can envision it and be happy with the result. And then a lot of communications, phones, emails, all that stuff to make sure everyone's on the same page and knows what happens. But that's what my goal really is as a watershed coordinator, getting the paperwork in order, making sure the grant funds are available and all that communication happens. So that way, when the time comes, we can be out there and actually make it happen. So the day of implementation, some key things, lessons learned, have a rain date because rain gardens are great, but they do go hand in hand with rain. So trying to figure that out, or if it is chance of rain, whether you're going to push it back or just have a place where you can kind of dry out for a little bit. Having all the tools on site. So, I mean, you know, we aren't using excavators a lot of times. These are just hand shovels, rakes and stuff like that. So folks can either bring their own, use ours, stuff like that. Reviewing the plan together. But then the important thing is to just try and enjoy ourselves while we're doing it, taking turns, taking breaks, making sure no one's getting too burnt out on it. And like I said, it can be kind of the Wild West when we're doing these rain gardens. Some of these students, you can definitely tell, have never held a shovel in their entire life. And that's where we just give them different obligations. They can be our DJ for the day and make stuff happen. So like I said, everyone has a role to play and we can always keep someone active and involved with that. But then when we have a rain garden implemented, like I said, that's when it's time to congratulate everyone for their hard work, the effort that they put in to make it happen. So whether we're going out for pizza or having donuts, the other important thing is to definitely recognize our partners and highlight this conservation effort. So we do a lot of signage as well. You know, it doesn't really look at, you have folks driving by and you see a dozen people standing around in a front yard with shovels. Neighbors definitely take notice. but then making sure that you have that long-term education out there as well. So signage is key, especially that first year when the plants aren't really growing much. A rain garden in progress sign can go a long way to educate folks. But then social media, news, press releases, all good ways to try and help document and identify this stuff as well. So why would we go through all this effort with rain gardens? And so for a breakdown, tried to do a comparison between our volunteer rain gardens and our traditional contractor rain gardens. As you can see, we're at least going about half the cost for our rain gardens in both the high, middle, and low. And these rain gardens, are all designed to treat about the same amount. They're about average size, about average water quality. So trying to show that that's about equal there. But we've been able to get more conservation implemented because of this. In the first 10 years of the project, we did about 9 rain gardens total. And in the last 8 years that we've been utilizing this volunteer rain garden program, we've installed over 43. And so for the total of the watershed improvement project life cycle in 18 years, 19 of these have been contractor rain gardens and 32 have been volunteer rain gardens. And we definitely see that continuing to grow more. So good things about volunteer rain gardens. We can definitely get more projects on the ground, help with our grant dollars, getting those. The landowners are also saving money with these volunteers because we're not getting charged contractor labor. We're getting the community involved, which is great educational opportunities for them as well. It's good PR to show that students are involved, that the community is active in our watershed. And I would say, especially with the lower costs, you can get a lot more folks involved addressing environmental justice and equitable issues there. And this program that we're utilizing, it can be replicated elsewhere, but it does take local leadership, someone like a watershed coordinator or a very enthusiastic individual to try and help lead and coordinate that effort, or you get more folks involved with that. There's definitely a lot of lessons learned looking back at some of our first rain gardens we did and the volunteers and the expectations we've had. So you learn a lot by actually getting it implemented. The planning on the front end is quite a bit as well. And, these rain gardens, one rain garden isn't going to get delist a watershed impairment, but we definitely see growing impacts through these conservation efforts of one homeowner does it, neighbors take notice, they're more willing to, especially if we can get a whole neighborhood involved or a nice area. That's where we're going to have a tremendous change with that. And so, yeah, we'll take questions here in a little bit, but there's my contact information for any questions or concerns.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ann Staudt. I'm with Iowa State University with the Water Rocks program. Super excited to be here today. So just to poll the audience before we get going, before today, who in the crowd has heard of Water Rocks? Okay, I love it. That's awesome. Well, we're going to be highlighting a little bit about the program, some of the successes over the years, some of our different offerings. And I recognize also that I'm in a really precarious position. I'm standing between you and drinks. So we're going to keep this rolling. All right, so let's get started. I was going to highlight first a little bit about the program since it's new to a lot of you folks, but it's a really unique program and really unique use and innovative use of 319 funds. I think really unique across the country. So Water Rocks is based in Iowa. We're Iowa's award-winning youth water education program. We're housed at Iowa State University, but being a part of Extension and being funded by 319 dollars, we serve citizens across the state of Iowa. And our focus is on youth. Our focus is on the next generation. The program was established in 2012, so pretty exciting to have been a decade in existence and going as strong as ever. So why focus on youth? Why the emphasis on the next generation? Our viewpoint on it is that today's students are tomorrow's farmers and scientists, watershed coordinators, elected officials, teachers, artists, and more. So how can we help them to care and to act when it comes to our natural resources? Water, land, wildlife, all these natural resources topics that interconnect us, regardless of if it's our profession, like those of us in the room, or if we're just a citizen of the United States. We all have a stake in terms of water quality. And so that's the foundation of reaching the next generation, helping them to have a base level, be an educated citizen base. So WaterRocks is really built on the foundation of combining STEM, so the science, technology, engineering, and math fields, with music and the arts. It's a really unique mashup and really effective as well in terms of engaging youth and helping to meet them where they're at today. So Steve Hopkins, when he introduced, he said, this is an urban session, and we've got two presenters here from our heavily agricultural state of Iowa. With WaterRocks, we are reaching youth across our state. So in any given year, so we're reaching urban youth, we're reaching rural youth. Any given year with WaterRocks, 50 to 65% of our youth reached are in our urban areas, our large urban areas, as well as our small and mid-sized cities. And then obviously we're reaching a substantial amount of rural youth as well. With our program, we're taking a really intentional and balanced approach with agriculture and the environment, recognizing that, yes, it's a delicate interplay, but we've got to be talking to each other. We're all in this together in terms of water quality and the road forward in terms of our healthy environment. Okay, so that's the backstory of WaterRocks. As I mentioned, funded through $319, and huge shout out to the Iowa DNR, to the 319 program for their foresight and their forward thinking in terms of funding such a unique program in its infancy. It's been really exciting to see it develop, and kudos. So many of you know Alan Bonini, Steve Hopkins, Steve Conradi have all been really instrumental in helping to keep this program running. So huge shout out there. And I think it's a model that can be replicated in other states as well in terms of a way to utilize $319 towards education and outreach. Okay, so let's dive into some of the different offerings with WaterRocks, as well as some of the successes. These two are going to be sort of interwoven. So I've got pictures, and then I've got some key numbers to share with you as well in terms of what we do. Okay, so WaterRocks reaches the next generation through a ton of different means. One of our signature offerings are our classroom presentations, where we're going into schools and directly interacting with youth across the state. We have different offerings for grades K through 12, though we primarily focus on the upper elementary through middle school age groups. So 3rd through 8th grade is really the heart and soul of who we're trying to reach with WaterRocks. Okay, so that's classroom presentations during most of the year. But as we all learned to adapt during the pandemic, and we also developed an alternative, which was virtual presentations, which we dubbed WaterRocks live streaming. And so this was, as the name implies, so it was a live interactive presentation with interaction built in via things like Google Docs with the students, virtual scavenger hunts. So developed as part of the pandemic, but given Midwest winters, we decided that this would earn a spot in the starting lineup, and it stuck around for the winter months. So we offer the virtual presentations typically during the months of January and February. And then the rest of the academic year, we're out doing those traditional classroom presentations. Okay, so to give you a sense of scale, these are numbers for one school year. WaterRocks is in 165 schools across the state, 586 presentations, over 13,000 students reached. So is it making a difference? Yeah, we've got a lot of numbers to say we've talked to a lot of students. So how do we evaluate this? We evaluate as a staff. Of course, we do a self-evaluation, but we also evaluate students through a really fun mechanism. So we do a pre and post trivia. In other words, a pre and post assessment, but an assessment is boring, right? Trivia is fun. So seriously, students love trivia. Some of students tell us trivia is their favorite part of the presentation. It's amazing. Okay, so we'll ask a multiple choice question related to the topic of that presentation. For instance, what is a watershed? And then they get 4 choices. They vote. We do this in real time. So we'll read the question out loud. They can look at the choices, and then we'll read the question again. And then we do heads down, eyes closed. Raise your hand for the answer that you think is best. Secret vote style. So to give you a sense of some numbers here, so this was looking at 3rd through 8th graders. At the start of the presentation, 39% of students correctly answered that trivia question. For instance, if we're talking about water quality, they correctly answered the question of what is a watershed. Afterwards, that number went up to 89%. This is a 45-minute presentation, one day, one time presentation. So really super impactful, excited about these evaluation results and the difference it's making with youth across the state of Iowa. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. We're a small team and we can only get to so many schools. Our demand actually far exceeds our capacity. So we're a team of 6, and just this past fall, we got requests from 260 different schools. I mean, you saw those numbers from last year. We were in 165. So, I mean, it's wonderful to see that demand continue to grow. But can we continue to reach students in other ways as well beyond when we're physically there? So we've got some super fun video series. You can find all of those on our website and our YouTube channel. So like this one is a video of the song Scoop That Poop. Just planting seeds. There's lots of good things for you to check out after the presentation today. We have an interactive computer game called Rock Your Watershed, where students get to choose their land use and how they're going to manage different parcels of land within a watershed. And then their score is based on environmental factors. So are they keeping sediment out of the water, keeping nutrients out of the water? How are they promoting biodiversity? Are they making a profit? These are all real world scenarios, right? But it's also a game of choice and chance, because there's chance involved with rainfall, different rainfall scenarios, and you don't get to control that. So we're super proud of this. It's currently in version 2, version 3 is in the works, so stay tuned. But just to give you a few numbers here, it's been played over 225,000 times. So very excited about that as well. And it's a way to continue the learning outside of our direct interactions with youth. Our Water Rock Summit workshops are professional development workshops for teachers, for watershed coordinators, extension educators, to help really think multiplier effect. You come in for the workshop, 1 or 2 day workshop, we train you on all these awesome different original hands-on games, activities, lessons, send you home with $600 worth of goods to then implement in your community and your school outreach. So it's a way to help multiply what our small team can do. And it has the power to then amplify these messages over multiple grades, over multiple years, multiple generations. So a couple of numbers here. This is cumulative since 2014, but we've trained 298 teachers and then 74 extension educators and conservation professionals. And the folks that have attended have told us that it has helped them grow in terms of their proficiency, understanding water quality, soil health, ecosystems, from their assessments, starting out, coming in with a self-assessed proficiency score of 58%, jumping up to 82% following the workshop. And we also are in communication with them to see how they're using the materials, which ones they're using most and what's most effective. Okay, so if this sounds intriguing to you, save the date, because we have a summit workshop coming up, January 25th. You get yourself to Ames, Iowa. We'd love to have you join us at this workshop. Same deal applies. You go home with $600 worth of hands-on games and activities. So number of spots remaining, I can count. They're less than would fit on one hand. So if you're interested, talk to me afterwards. Check out our website, but we would love to have you join us. Okay, a couple more elements. With our sister program, Iowa Learning Farms, we have these conservation station trailers, which we take out to community outreach events, county fairs, farmers markets, etc. We couldn't do any of this without our interns. So we run a water resources internship program. Doubles the size of our team from 6 to about 12 during the summer months. And it's an amazing opportunity for these budding conservation professionals to kind of get their feet wet and exposure to outreach, education, a little bit of research as well on the side with some of our other collaborators. Okay, and last but not least, we have a musical. Water Rock's the musical. Okay, no joke. So think Hamilton meets Magic School Bus meets water science. Good stuff. No joke, we have a song about coagulation. There's a water treatment dance. Never thought you'd see that, right? Okay, so the musical is also available free of charge to your communities, your schools. Again, check out our website, talk to me afterwards. Would love to share more information about that. Okay, so just a couple Concluding thoughts here, some of our keys to success with Water Rocks. It's grounded in sound science. We're embracing a really unique, creative, multifaceted approaches. So music, the arts, movement, games, competition, engaging students in really fun, yet grounded in sound science mechanisms to think about the world around them. It's all highly interactive, and it's all about inspiring curiosity, caring, to be thinking beyond ourselves and our devices. And it's really focused on tangible action items as well. What can students be doing in their own daily lives, in their schools, in their communities? Okay, so to wrap it up, shout out to our funders. Again, big shout out to the Iowa DNR, Section 319 funding there, as well as our partners with the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture, Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and then we do get some supplemental support from Des Moines Waterworks, our county extension councils, as well as local soil and water conservation districts. Okay, so where you can find more, you can find us online at waterrocks.org, on the socials at waterrocksisu, and to help you remember our website, so come find me while you're having your drinks and looking at posters. We've got Water Rocks stickers for anybody who's interested. This would look really great on your hydro flask or your Stanley water bottle, and it's got our website, waterrocks.org, on there as well. We'd love to pass these out and share. So thank you so much. Appreciate your time and attention. So.
Okay, 3 great presentations, and we'll open it up to questions for Marlene, Josh, and Ann.
Hi, I have a question for Marlene, hopefully 2 quick ones. For your partnership with the Sound School, since you said it's a vocational school, do you guys have any partnership or programming around helping students post graduating if they're thinking about a college career? And then the second question is around paying your community leaders, if you've had any challenges or need to be flexible around how you pay them.
Was the second question about paying the community leaders? Yeah. So they received a stipend, and that was in a job posting that they applied to. I don't know off the top of my head what that stipend was. But Save the Sound also helped secure that additional local funding through the Greater New Haven funding source, so that they could make sure that she got paid for all the extra work that she did once the second community leader fell out. In terms of the Sound School, I don't know much about the school, but they do have programs, non-college programs that they support. I know that they have strong connections to military programs, for example, but I believe that one of their missions for the school is to promote the students not only that want to go to college, but also to see what other jobs are out there that don't require a college education. There's the fishing industry in New Haven, things like that.
Great presentations, everybody. I have a question, well, 2 questions for Josh about the rain gardens. I'm wondering if you've had to deal with any homeowners associations when you're putting in rain gardens and how you navigate that. And then also, what are the lifespans of these rain gardens, and do they always meet those lifespans? Have you had issues with, people taking them out before you're supposed to, and, how do you navigate that as well?
So as far as Jetto? Okay. Check. Okay. So as far as HOAs, yes, I guess we have installed some rain gardens within homeowners association districts, and I guess we just had to work with the homeowners to make sure that they get their approval in advance, so they aren't getting in trouble or breaking rules or anything like that. But that hasn't been an issue, I guess, thankfully. And for all the conservation practices that we install, we have the homeowners sign on to a maintenance agreement. For our stormwater management practices like rain gardens, it's 10 years. And so we do, because we understand that the homeowners might not necessarily live there for 10 years, we actually file that paperwork with our county assessor's office So it goes with the title of the house. So if they end up selling it, the next homeowner would end up assuming responsibility of that. And it's like a $7 fee. But it, like I said, it just helps to ensure that these conservation practices are going to be in place for that time. And I will say that we have had, you know, of the 50 plus rain gardens we've installed, yes, there has been homeowners that have changed. So we just try and educate them. I've had new homeowners reach out to me with questions. How do we take care of these? Things like that. Are these plants weeds? Or these ones we want? And so we just try and be there as a technical resource for anything that they may need. And thankfully, yeah, these rain gardens have, we've had some that have been in longer than the 10 years and they're still looking great. We try and go out maybe about once a year in the summertime just to scope things out and see if we need to maybe do like a friendly reminder nudge to maybe like weed or something like that. Because public perception of these conservation practices is really important. So making sure they're maintained and is just going to help ensure that we get more of those out in community.
Do you, if a homeowner ends up buying a house and decides they don't like the kind of vegetation that you chose, you don't have any objections to them changing the vegetation in the rain garden, do you?
So yeah, vegetation is really important. And I guess that's something I usually try and incorporate the homeowners with when we're doing the design to make sure the current ones are happy with it, because we have options for several dozen different prairie species to include in there. And usually what I try and do with the design is have at least a couple grasses, usually like prairie dropseed and little blue stem because they're short growing. And then try and have flowering forbs, something that's going to be blooming throughout the entire season. So we have early bloomers, lots of middle bloomers, and then some late bloomers. So that way we're having the biggest impact on our pollinators there. So that's our intended goal. But yep, there's some homeowners that maybe don't want as much diversity. And maybe for a maintenance perspective, they maybe only want a couple species, and that's perfectly fine as well. As long as, like I said, we try and keep it exclusive to native prairie plants, try and avoid cultivars and stuff like that. But yep, as part of that maintenance, the homeowners, if they're wanting to change out the plant species, they're welcome to. We haven't had that happen too much though. We maybe added some plant species if some have died off, but otherwise, yeah, it hasn't been much of an issue, but that's something we'd gladly talk and work with homeowners on.
Hello there, Chris Davis from Illinois EPA, and I think you were just leaning into the question that I had, which is sometimes we have landowners with our rain garden implementation that have incredibly expensive taste and large visions for the beauty of their yard. So actually two questions here is, one is there a limitation on the amount of funds that can go per project? And then the second question is there an opportunity for you to get bulk materials to do multiple rain garden projects and bring your costs down there?
So I'd say we don't necessarily have a cap on our rain garden projects. We try and be mindful though of our funds, and the funds we utilize go specifically to the construction of the practice itself. You know, sometimes that might involve a retaining wall, which is where you'll definitely see those prices increase. I guess we haven't really looked at bulk ordering, but we do have some local options that we've been very grateful for. So both our local municipalities do have a seasonal compost facility where we can get high quality soil and compost as well as mulch for free. So that can be a great way of cost savings. So that's where we've installed some rain gardens where all we've had to do is buy plants. And that's where you could see like, yeah, $1.75 a square foot for one of our rain gardens. I think the homeowner's initial purchase was $150 up front, and then they got that fully reimbursed on the back end. So, yep, I would say being mindful, making sure they're not egregious expenses. Yeah, that's all stuff I guess we try and work with the homeowners on.
Thank you. Okay, so something for each of you kind of. Anne, who are your staff? Where do they come from? What are their backgrounds? How long have they been employed?
Okay, so who are our staff? So yes, our staff come from very interesting and diverse backgrounds. Our staff range from the social sciences, so anthropology, political science, economics, with an agricultural focus, environmental engineering, agricultural biosystems engineering. Yeah, our interns tend to range like the environmental science, water resources, natural resources, agronomy fields. And we also have folks with, several of us have music and artistic backgrounds as well. And then we do some contract work with folks as well to find and utilize local talent to help make things happen.
I feel like you must have a very strong connection to the university then. Okay, next question. You were just talking about, Josh, the reimbursements. So we have some work that we're trying to do in communities. One, a number of them don't speak English, so we're working with, you know, actual translations that are real translations and don't just mean nothing. That's a struggle to have that, I guess, done and compensated. Anyways, the question is about reimbursements. That doesn't work for everybody. Not everybody can front that money and then wait to be reimbursed, because our system, they say 6 weeks, but actually in reality, we're finding out it's more like 10, and we're really sorry. But how do you deal with that?
Yes, and I would say that's very, very poignant, especially for environmental justice, and something we're trying to be mindful of. Because yep, even a few $100s can be more than some folks can throw up front. And so what and I guess I didn't really talk about this earlier, but our sister city, the city of Waterloo, does have a lot of diverse backgrounds with it. And so our local SWCD is actually doing a pilot project with some USDA funds looking at diverse and traditionally underserved agriculture, farmers in urban areas, and trying to help look at ways we can get more involvement, meet their needs. And so a lot of that has involved meeting folks on the ground, utilizing translators, and trying to get feedback that way. So we're looking forward to that report that we'll have prepared here this next year. And I guess what we're potentially looking at is maybe ways to partner with our local municipalities, see if there's groups, or if we can maybe utilize some funding to pay for the materials up front and then get reimbursed that way. Because like I said, there are lots of local supported groups that, yep, especially if this funds are coming, they can wait, 3 to 10 weeks to get that reimbursement, whereas some homeowners can't. So like I said, hopefully something we'll be addressing and getting a framework here in the coming months.
Time for one more question.
I just had a question about funding, kind of to go off the previous question, both for Josh and for Ann, just kind of how the funding, that breakdown looks like for your programs, and then maybe different entities or sponsoring organizations that are contributing to that.
So with Dry Run Creek, we're utilizing our Section 319 funds from the EPA through the DNR. And so we're able to provide 75% cost share for that. With the volunteer rain gardens, we can use the labor from the volunteers as the match. So that way the homeowners get the full reimbursement on the materials. We have some additional paperwork forms we need to submit as part of that. We've also utilized throughout our county, for folks that aren't within the watershed, a program called REAP, which stands for Resource Enhancement and Protection, that utilizes state funds for that. That can provide 50% cost share for stormwater management practices, including rain gardens. So we go through a similar process of filing the paperwork, getting the grant funds secured for these individual homeowners in advance, and then filling out the paperwork for the volunteers to count that matching labor, so they can get all or most of the materials cost covered as a reimbursement.
All right, and so with Water Rocks, so our funding, so we also receive $319 EPA flow through the Iowa DNR. Beyond that, we receive some supplemental funding from Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and then the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture. That's really how Water Rocks runs. And this actually kind of piggybacks on the earlier question about our team's background. I should clarify, I said we have 6 team members. None of us are full-time employed with the Water Rocks program. So we're all practitioners working on other projects as well. So through other grants, through other funds. But I think that's also part of the strength of our program. We're out on the ground. We're involved with social science, agronomic, engineering, research projects. And then we're bringing that expertise and our vast expertise in extension to the program. So I said we had 6 of us working on the program. Not any single one of us is fully funded. So it's covering a portion of each of our time in addition to other responsibilities.
I don't think that question was addressed to me.
That wraps it up for today. So before you rush out and see the posters, let's give them a round of applause.
All right.